Just a couple seconds and we should be there. Just a couple seconds and we should be there. Okay, me mute. We are live on the web, so I think you're good to go.
Thank you. Today is Monday, January 4th, 2021. We will call this meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Am I supposed to start this out loud or are we all saying it at the same time?
I pledge allegiance to the flag,
To the flag
of
of the
United
United States of America
to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I wasn't sure if everybody wanted me to wait until they were all unmuted or not for that, so sorry. Agenda item number 2 are the school committee member introductions. We will start with Bobby, Karen, and then go through the normal way that we proceed.
Bobby Avery, Chief Administrative Officer.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1, and Chair of Facilities.
Elgin Physic, Ward 2.
Karen Majoris Collins, Ward 3, and Chair of the Curriculum Subcommittee.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4, Negotiations.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5, and Homelessness.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6, Chair of the Finance Committee.
And Paul Beauplant, Ward 7.
Alicia Ray, City Council Representative and Parliamentarian and Chair of the Policy Subcommittee.
Megan Parks, I'm the at-large representative. Agenda item number 3 is the COVID update. Oh, sorry, Jake, you didn't do your introduction.
I was just going to roll with it.
Okay,
Jake,
sorry.
Superintendent, and COVID-19 update. Today, new to me, 4 new cases connected to our schools. Of course, everyone is aware of messaging that was broadcasted over the weekend that we're taking a remote approach this week for numerous factors. Nutrition-wise, our operations team has coordinated, and we've shared some messaging out so that nutrition is available for members of our community who have that need. Did share an updated version of information tonight and posted some things on social media about specific sites and times that has been coordinated through our team there. I'm open to any questions people have. Certainly a lot of information was shared yesterday in the letter with various points of concern that led to the decision to be remote this week.
Anyone have any questions? Kiernan?
Yeah, I want to start off, Superintendent Langless, by recognizing that you obviously had to make a tough decision this week, and I want to applaud you for making a decision in the interest of the best health and welfare of our students, staff, and community. You know, I guess my question is really more big picture. You know, we have this ongoing surge. The best public health models suggest that it's going to get worse next week, and then the week after, and then probably the week after that, and then when we get to February, we'll see. God willing, there's a some level of come down from that height. But I guess my question has 2 parts. Number one, what are you evaluating in terms of your personal perspective on having schools be open or not next week? And number 2, you know, your decision obviously was announced to the public pretty shortly before students were going to go back to school. and I get that you're grappling with things. I guess my question in that respect is, do you think that there is value in trying to take a more proactive approach and give people lead time to know that we're not going to be in school because we have these pretty predictable waves?
Yeah, I guess as I sit here right now, my thinking was to continue to gather all the information that we can this week and encourage people to be communicating with the schools. Hopefully with some added window that people get tested as appropriate, and share that information. And then look up as early as possible. I was thinking end of day Wednesday to really bring the team together, look at what information we have available, and then try to give families as much heads up as we can. I think you said it well that we're grappling with a lot of inputs right now. Everything from staffing levels, number of positives reported, number of positives that could potentially not be reported or unknown, symptomatic, asymptomatic, community numbers that are specific, and how that impacts our ability to carry out our operations. So you're right. I grapple with it. It's not. I don't wish it on others per se, and it was hard to not do it sooner. But I didn't feel I had information sooner than I had it. Late Saturday when Bobby, Karen, and I started really considering putting on a message Sunday morning, trying to give people as much notice as possible.
Any other questions? Mr. Physick?
The attendance issue, I know I had asked for attendance report, and I know you're working on that. I guess generally, how good or bad is the attendance, and what is the protocol if a student is successfully absent? And to piggyback off that, how are we balancing the line between understanding people's situations and kind of taking a firm line that this is kind of, not showing up is unacceptable? I know the high school has, doing home visits and stuff, but haven't heard much about middle school or elementary school.
So those efforts are happening across the board in different capacities as far as looking for students who have not engaged online. We did communicate this morning, Member Physick and I, about what attendance data could we pull from today. And I tried to, but that became tricky because today for many teachers was the first remote day. We wanted to grant people some flexibility in that, and so they could prepare. And so many or most teachers contacted kids today, but there were some who did not. But we did discuss in advance, at least providing people some time if they needed to circle the wagons, if you will. I didn't want teachers to go in on Sunday and have to prepare for the shift. I wanted to make sure they had some time today. And so we put that in the letter and then clarified it after. As far as attendance goes, in general, what we've seen with these patterns is kids who have a routine, they'll connect. Kids who still struggle to have a routine, still struggle to connect. There's certainly less interruption to a student in person as they get up and go to school and they're there. And that's seemingly beneficial from a teaching and learning engagement perspective. I do want to collect data this week. Starting tomorrow, it'd be expected that all students in their respective cohorts would be engaging with their teachers. So we should be able to gather better data the rest of this week.
Ms. Wright?
Thank you. I think related to Member Physick's question, I'm curious about vacancies on staff and how those might be further impacting. So if we already have teacher positions open and then folks are making the right call using the screener and staying home, and then we reach an unsafe staffing level at the school, are those comparable to past years? The staff vacancies that are in those positions that could help with that? And then I guess probably related, how's our subbing program going?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll kick it to Bobby because she'll have probably some more thoughts about vacancies. initially we have been monitoring, and we have a good report that's coming out to us for things that have been logged as absences are concerned. And so we have been monitoring those numbers. On days that are remote, those numbers are down, which makes sense because people might be willing to work through the day, but they're not exposing anyone to anything. But we are seeing that line of, I think when we started this in August, I was saying things like, we're seeing, or September, 70 to 80. And right now we're fluctuating around mid 90s, just over 100 on a lot of days. I would say at least 70% of days are between 95 and 105. There are other days that it's much lower, but it's still 70, 80 people a day. As far as how that compares to other years, I'd actually have to go pull that. I don't know that off the top of my head, but Bobby may. I don't know.
I actually don't know that number off the top of my head, but I can tell you that I have some real concerns like Jake and Karen, I'm sure, over the next few weeks. We've done a really good job. I don't know if we shared this with all of you, but we've done a really good job at recruiting building-based subs. And I think that was a big win for us to be able to do that. Each building has 4 to 5 stable subs in their buildings that building administrators get to use how they want. But I worry about the strain on our sub pool over the next few weeks.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Majerus-Collins.
Yeah, a couple of questions that I had posed to me I think it was this week, might have been last week, by folks in the community. First, I wanted to ask, and I guess I'll ask them all, and then Superintendent Langlis or anyone else who has answers can go ahead and answer them. The first question is prior in prior moments that our district has been remote, we've made a commitment to paying subs who had been working diligently every single day. I've heard that that's no longer the case, and if it's not, I have to raise that as a concern, especially since we're now hearing that we may have trouble attracting subs. I also would want to take up the issue of potentially increasing sub pay to solve that problem, as mentioned early last month at a meeting. And I wanted to ask about the possibility that there are vacancies for positions that are currently posted on the website that are no longer vacant. And so people are going through the whole process of applying at the school level, only to then be told at the administrative level that actually the job's been filled, which I've heard about on a couple of occasions. And finally, and perhaps most pressingly, the entire school committee heard about an incident at LMS from a staff member there where a student was coming to school, had not gotten a positive test yet, was not faithfully and honestly filling out the screeners, then had the positive test come back that in fact that student had been positive. And obviously that was a real concern for that staff member, and it would be a real concern to anyone who has interactions at that school. And so I guess in sort of a broader sense, what are we doing to make sure that the students, and to a lesser extent staff, are faithfully and honestly filling out our screeners, and what level of confidence do you have that those screeners are being filled out truthfully and are catching cases that we might otherwise have impacting things further?
I could start with the latter point, but I would see if Bobby wants to chime in on the other components. To the latter point, I think there's been very few instances in which I've become frustrated, and that particular case frustrated me a great deal. We have to, as a community, continue to take care of each other. And the idea that someone had been tested and then returned to school before knowing a result really bothered me, and it's inappropriate. I've said that publicly numerous times. I can't I can't say anything other than that. If anyone's watching, spread the word. If you have symptoms, you need to stay home. If you have symptoms of COVID, you need to contact your primary care provider. You need to see if you need a test. And if it's recommended that you get a test, please get one. And through all those steps, we ask that you continue to communicate with the school, because otherwise we have no threshold to know if we've got no COVID possible situations or 30 that are connected to an event that we did through school, or once we're back to school. So these are all very important things. Actually, I'll thank you for even asking the question, just to have an opportunity to share again publicly. What we have is our word in this process. And if we are screening honestly and we're following the protocols, we will be fine. If we're dodging those things or sending students to school that are asymptomatic, who you're waiting on a test result for, it's just irresponsible. It's not acceptable.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Physick.
So while we were on schools on break, there was an article about different schools systems gathering COVID tests that the nurses can give. Is that something you know of, or is that something that we could participate in? I guess the whole premise from the article, if I remember correctly, was that if a kid had symptoms, they could test them there instead of kind of waiting to the 72 hours or whatever, how long ever it takes to test, so we kind of know right away if it was COVID related. Have you heard about that, or?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I want to answer that question, but then I want to kick it back to Bob, because I think Kieran had asked a couple of the questions that we didn't yet address. So yes, I did consult with our COVID response team and also our nurses specifically. They had some major concerns about testing at schools for a number of reasons. One is, if you think you might need a test, you walk to school. And then so you're exposing that entire environment to a potentially positive case, where all of our other protocols are, if you think you have symptoms, please stay home, so we don't create community spread. I would also add that our nursing staff, who I think are, along with our teachers and ed techs and everybody who's showing up for work every day, amazing through all of this. But our nurses are right on that front line, and as well as others. But when students don't feel well, or they report a symptom that developed at school, they get sent to the nurse. And our nurses are doing their very best to facilitate a process in which they take the next appropriate step. They're also calling everybody who didn't come in that day to see if they're homesick, if they're watching their sibling, if what's going on, how come you're not at school today, so we can continue to track that. I did find the article interesting because none of the schools in our immediate area, to my knowledge, are testing anyone at school. When this did pop up from the state, I filled out a form. The state asked to fill out if you were interested, and in the form I put a comment that I would like to know if we could do this with a community partner. St. Mary's and B Street has been a wonderful partner with us, helping us through this process. I can't thank Carolyn McNamara and her staff enough. But I would like to, if we have those resources, let's get them to Lewiston, and let's run through a medical facility that's been a partner of ours, and not running it through our school. And so that's still out there, but I don't know of a lot of schools who are actually testing on site.
Go back to Bobby to finish answering Kieran's questions.
Yeah, I can try. So it's my interpretation of the language that was crafted and you all voted on back in September, that are, and I call them assignment-based subs, are not paid. Our building-based subs, our long-term subs they continue to be paid. The caveat to that is that you all specified that if we go full remote, and the language back in the spring, back in April, was if we were remote, not intermittently, but if we were remote, that they would be paid. So the intermittent 1 week off, there is no provision in the latest language in September that covers that, to my knowledge or my interpretation.
Go ahead, Kieran.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. In my view, we ought to fix that. Subs are some of the most low-paid people in our district. So these are the folks for whom in many cases a paycheck makes a big difference. And I also sort of want to reflect on the fact that, you know, our school system at the moment is in desperate need. And, you know, when or if we're back in school next week, the week after, whenever, we're not going to be able to function without a strong sub pool. So, you know, I guess I hadn't anticipated raising this issue as an item for the committee to vote on, but I guess I would ask, I'd make a motion to suspend the rules, just to clarify that we want to pay subs who are working, you know, people who are working every day, not folks who are coming in once a month, but people who are working every day. We want to pay them if we're intermittently remote, as well as if we're remote over a sustained period of time. So I'll make a motion to suspend the rules to that effect.
Is there a second? Seeing no second. Bobby, did you have more questions to continue answering?
I'm not sure, Kieran, did I get them all?
One of them was just a comment that I want us to take up sub pay to address what you have said as a shortfall in our sub pool. And then I also wanted to ask about the possibility that we have vacancies being posted on the website that are no longer vacant. And so you have people going through the rigmarole of submitting applications and potentially even interviewing for positions that then dingly says actually either never were vacancies or are already old. And I'm wondering if we can just make sure that our vacancy lists and what we're soliciting applications for actually reflects the jobs that are available.
So that is actually news to me, and I'd be really interested to have maybe an offline conversation with you to know better what you're hearing, because I too would be concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you an email.
Ms. Hawkins.
I just want a quick comment to Kieran and to the rest of the committee. I understand where he's coming from. Certainly see in these circumstances, you know, subs are really pulling extra rope just to try and keep us above water, and that is appreciated. As far as I know, though, they are part of negotiations and things like that goes through finance committee and then budgets. We can look in, the ability is to look into it, but I don't know about the timing or when that could happen or where it would come from. So I understand the motion behind it, and I don't disagree by any means, but there are still steps that need to be taken, and it wasn't seconded, so I don't see it going anywhere. But if it's something that's going to come up again, it's something that should be looked into.
I think that would be a great item to add to future agenda items to have a discussion on how we pay our subs and if we can make adjustments to that. We can put it on a future agenda in an appropriate fashion. Mr. Majerus-Collins.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. My understanding is that subs are not covered by a contract at the moment. You know, and in my view, that's unfortunate, but it is how it is at the moment. But that does suggest that we can make unilateral changes to compensation and to working conditions. And I would just point out to the committee that, you know, to my mind, subs fall into two categories. You have people who are, you know, retired employees of the system who want to come back in occasionally, and you have folks who are doing it as a job. And my understanding is that we've seen a tremendous drop off in the retired teachers, retired ed techs who want to come back in a few times a month because they're concerned about their own health and safety. Folks who are retired in that category are almost certainly in high risk categories based on age, and who can blame them for not wanting to do that? So you're left with a situation where you're relying on folks who are doing this as their primary employment. But if we're not committing to paying them during intermittent remote periods, then it's hard to see why folks wouldn't be trying to jump off at the first possible opportunity for a more stable and reliable job.
Ms. Avery, Bobby.
So I'm happy to put together an analysis of our sub use and sub pay. We have increased it some. But I'm also happy to remind the committee of the language that was approved back in the spring. I can bring that forward as well, which was addressed then. That probably would be nice language to bring for consideration for intermittent.
Thank you. Ms. Ray.
Thank you. Just realizing what the timing of our next meeting would be. This question, I don't think can wait. I believe a number of educators will be in the upcoming 1B phase of the vaccine rollout in Maine. And so I'm curious if there is a plan to implement any policy about obtaining that vaccine. I realize it's more applicable to staff than to students. I'm just curious. It's uncharted territory, I think. So just want to start the conversation.
Yeah, so to that end, I have been following that as closely as I can. I know that the lower number of vaccines that have come to Maine have just slowed things up, or lower than expected numbers. We haven't gotten a tentative time frame yet. All I know is that we're in the queue for 1B, and we just keep our ears open. I would anticipate, though, that I'll be thinking and working with the leadership team here to be very mindful of when those can be deployed, if you will, and how the schools can help facilitate that, even if it's at the schools, if that makes sense. And if that's the case, I'd be looking at organizing a schedule and making sure we don't have, students around. But I don't know that we'll be able to do them on site. When I asked the question initially, there's an observation period. And so certain things need to be in place. And I don't know if you heard in the news, there's been very few cases of people having allergic responses. And so medical facilities are required to be very nearby or to have the right things in place. So I don't know that we'd be able to do that at school. But for example, if we know that, Monday, the whatever is the day that they can take our staff from, say, a couple of buildings to facilitate that process, I would likely look at having no school on those days because we don't know when, what time, things of that nature. I'm also keeping a close eye on things, and I'm not privy to certain knowledge beyond what people see on TV or in the news. But that secondary shot that is 3 weeks later, or symptoms, if people are having side effects that, hey, for 2 or 3 days, as more get delivered, if people are not feeling well, we need to be mindful of that. So it may cause another disruption when we go towards vaccination. There's also been, I know we've talked about it lightly, Bobby can probably chime in more, but conversation through legal channels about what can you require, what can you mandate, and really where it's coming down to it is not advised to mandate it, but I do think it would be wise for us to help facilitate it for those who wish to get it.
Any further discussion? Mr. Majoris Collins.
Yeah, I appreciate Member Ray raising that topic, and this is more just a comment for everyone than a question. I just hope that members of the committee and district leadership will lead by example, will take the vaccine as soon as it's available, and will publicly build faith in the vaccine because it's truly the only way that we're going to be able to get through this public health crisis and get out on the other side of this pandemic and go back to school 5 days a week, which is what everybody wants to have happen. So I just really encourage everybody in the committee and everybody in district leadership to think about their role in building public faith for the vaccine.
All right. Agenda item. Oh, sorry. Mr. Physick.
Yeah, I just got 3 more questions in regards to COVID. Are the teachers back doing professional development? And if they are, what are some of the things they're doing? And 2, have we analyzed the New Year assessments yet? And as well as have we analyzed data from our 4 core subjects, English, math, science, and social studies? And then I got one more question after that. That's it.
Your second question around NOEA data, Karen has actually compiled that so that we can review it. It's comparative from last year when we could last take it to as a large group to what we did in the fall. So that's one piece. The NOEA doesn't measure all the content areas. So data points around, say, science or social studies are hard to gather at this point in time, especially with remote schooling. Karen, do you want to add anything to either of those?
No, you and I haven't had a chance to really dig into that together, so I think you've covered it.
It has been gathered, though. We do have it.
Okay, as far as NOEA, I was just regular, not necessarily NOEA in regards to the subjects, just in general from we're, I think the high school and everyone's at least completed at least a trimester or a quarter. So I'm just curious if that data is being compiled of kind of where our shortcomings coming in those content areas.
Yeah, I think we can gather that. That would be a good data set to have now that we've had a term.
And I can just add that I know the high school and the middle school in particular have really been looking at that. And I know the high school has put some things into place to support students who are maybe falling short in certain areas. I don't have the data off the top of my head, but I know those things have been put into place. At the elementary level, the same sort of thing at the school level, looking at the RTI process and that. And of course, it comes with the challenges of the situation we're in. But at individual school levels, I know they have been looking at a district level. I've not taken a look. I have not looked at grades in particular. I've been looking at the assessment data.
Okay, is there any way we can get, like, once all that's compiled, is there any way we can get like a presentation on that or some sort of copy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I just got one last question. Are we monitoring things like home visits, referrals for counseling, individuals actually doing counseling? Are we monitoring those things?
Sorry, I was grabbing a note. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, are we monitoring things like home visits, referrals for counseling, individuals doing counseling? Are we monitoring those kind of things just to kind of see if there's what should we be reaching out more to offer those kind of things as far as I know kids are having a very difficult time through these times. So I'm just curious, are we monitoring those kind of things?
So as far as monitoring the home visits, we do track things for truancy purposes. How thorough that is, I can ask building principals. From a counseling perspective, we've maintained the counseling expectations. We have both internal and external partners around that, and those can be done remotely. It's permissible to do remotely. So I have not heard anything other than they're happening as they should. But I think it's an area I can probe a little more deeply. I'll add that to the data list.
Any other discussion? If not, agenda item number 4 is the consent agenda. Is there anyone with anything they'd like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing no objections, the consent agenda is adopted. Agenda item number 5 is public comment, public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now or on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any? I see a hand raised.
Sherry, you can speak.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, my name is Sherry Cloutier, 7 Hidden Valley Drive in Lewiston. I'm a mom to a 5th grader and a 10th grader in LPS schools. Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for all you've been doing during this very unique school year. My family is very grateful for the opportunity to have the option to keep our kids home for remote learning. And just the fact that you have hybrid and all these different options is wonderful for what works best for each family. You know, all the teachers have been going above and beyond, doing all they can to keep even the remote students fully engaged as much as they can. So thank you to all our wonderful teachers. I am excited to see my kids get back into the classroom. I think that's what everyone wants. But for now, we're doing well. I wanted to share one positive thing about this school year for my high school student. He loves the 4 classes per semester schedule. So it's instead of having 4 classes one day, 4 separate classes the next day, blue and white days, 8 classes worth of homework and assignments to juggle. Having 4 classes every day has been like a shining star this year. And I think it is something that could even be used in future years, you know, if it could be worked out, you know. And I'd be curious too if other parents, some other parents I talked to have appreciated the 4 classes per day, every day for like a routine. It's really easy for the kids to kind of grasp and form relationships with their teachers in this way. So anyway, if you have further surveys coming up, maybe you could ask if other parents or teachers what they think of this 4 classes per semester. And I know it won't work for like LRTC students, but maybe there's an option to make it work for freshmen who typically don't do LRTC, or for kids like my son. He wanted to take 2 math classes this year, and he was able to do geometry semester 1, algebra 2 semester 2, and not have to overlap his learning in math. So it was a year's worth of math, but really it's almost 2 years credit, I guess. So that's it. I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much again for all you're doing, and I hope you guys have a good night.
Thank you, Sherry. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay. All right. Agenda item number 6, to receive an update regarding athletic stipends from LPS Athletic Director, Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, Mr. Fuller is joining us today. We wanted to revisit this. This came up. There was some questions about hiring coaches for sports seasons, not knowing if they'll happen and whatnot. I know this conversation goes back to last spring, where a decision was made because it was season started, things were already rolling to keep people whole. And I know we had another discussion. I want to say it was in June, and then again in August, connected to this. But we found that there's some real benefits to the kids from a social emotional perspective to still have that connection with the coaches. And I know Jason has a number of examples and some more to share. So I'll throw the floor to you. But
I just like initially to say thanks for supporting the coaches through this. I think my winter coaches have gone through a amazingly difficult time over the last couple of weeks. Just the way the structure's set up, where we have to wait every Friday and hope and pray we get a green color. And I just know it's been trying on my coaches. That being said, I do want to speak publicly about the coaches. I think the group has done a lot, even in these strange times, even though we're yellow. I've called around, talked to all of them personally, and just some of the things that my coaches are doing right now. One of my biggest concerns is the academic level of our students. So a lot of our coaches are making regular phone calls to kids, both individually or on Zoom as a group, to talk about academics, checking in on that. I've had some coaches do some Zoom calls where they did some support with some tutoring and things like that. Outside of that, I think I've got a number of coaches doing group training, Zoom training, where conditioning and things like that. They've done some individual training, preparing individual workouts for kids that need it, who have asked for special workouts. Our coaches have been doing that. A large group of our coaches are working with the seniors in terms of college placement, looking at both prep school and the collegiate level and trying to get kids at the next level, supporting their dreams and things like that. I've had a couple coaches do some home visits, making sure the wellness of their athletes and making sure they're doing okay. I pretty much meet with them weekly. They're attending those meetings with me. They're also attending their own staff meetings. I think it's really hard as a group. It's constant, planning, readjusting, planning again, based on the every Friday color code. And I know how hard these individuals have worked just to make sure that when we get that green color, they're going to be ready to roll and hopefully give our athletes a positive experience moving forward. So, I know we're paying people, and I know we haven't started, but at the same point, our coaches are doing a lot of work just to try to make sure our kids are socially and emotionally supported. There's some coaches that are teaching. I know I had a program tonight meet to start installing some of the offensive things they want to do when the season starts, some of the defensive things. So I know these individuals are working hard and preparing for a season. And I just hope, in the next couple of weeks, we get a green color and they can move forward and our athletes can experience a really positive winter season. I know it's been difficult for a lot of people. The key to this is we haven't missed a game yet. And, we still have the ability with the time left in the calendar to put on a season where kids can still play 12 games like scheduled and possibly even get some playoff games in as well. So it's been difficult, but I think there needs to be some hope and understanding that this is not over and there is still an opportunity to move forward with athletics in the next couple of weeks at the winter level. I know, we've started preparing already for the spring season. And hopefully getting outside will make things easier and vaccines will be out there and we can have a normal spring season if everything goes right. So I'm here to answer any questions that people have, but I just want to give you an update of what the coaches are doing right now to earn some of those stipends.
And just a reminder real quick to those who are out there who might just be listening, who are not fully aware, when we have a yellow designation as a county, sports are off, they're shelved. And so when Jason mentions yellow and green, until as a county we become green, sports are not, at least in person, feasible.
Mr. Physick.
Jason, has there been any talk anywhere from the MPA as we get deeper and deeper? And I think we all try to remain optimistic, but sometimes reality is reality. Is there any talk that once we get too deep that maybe the spring season get pushed back so we at least allow the winter season? Has there been any talk from any scutter about that? Just curiosity.
The talk that we hear is we really don't want to influence the spring season. Those kids lost that entirely last year. There was no chance to meeting. There was no practices. So I think we all want to try to somehow maintain that spring season and try to give them a full experience. Could it be pushed back? Absolutely. There's a chance of it. I think we're very fluid this year and adjustments are going to be made on the fly as we do this. So there is a chance, but right now I think we all really want to kind of protect that spring season and give those athletes a full season. But at the same time, we want to protect our winter athletes too right now and make sure they get something to experience.
Mr. Vopalant.
Jason, as you know, I'm the new guy on the block here and I need to be brought up to speed. Are our coaches on 1-year continuing contracts?
Yes.
So again, hypothetically, theoretically, if you did have a coach that was mailing it in and not showing the effort that would be expected by this committee and by you, that would certainly come into consideration of his reappointment for the following year.
Correct.
Fine, thank you.
Mr. Majerus Collins.
So I want to start by saying how unbelievably heartbreaking it is that so many of our athletes have missed so much of what makes their school experience special. And there's, whatever we do on this committee, whatever people do in the world, there's no way that folks are getting that back. And that's a real loss. So I want to recognize that. And I also want to credit the committee. I know that not everybody wanted to go ahead with paying coaches, but the majority did. And I think that has proven to be a really wise move. I think it showed support for our athletic program, and I want to give credit to the folks who saw that and went ahead with it. I'm pretty skeptical, Director Fuller. I mean, I appreciate your optimism. I'm pretty skeptical given the trajectory that we're going to get much opportunity to do anything until after February break at the very least. But I mean, hey, I'd love to be wrong on that. My understanding of this particular agenda item was that Vice Chair Damon had raised the question about hiring new coaches, and so the committee wanted to hear from you about sort of what your thoughts were on that. The committee obviously has already made the commitment to supporting our current coaches and keeping them whole and giving them the opportunity to do as much as they can and say, hey, we appreciate all that you've done for your career so far, and you know, when all this is over, we want you to still be here and still be leading our students. My understanding of the agenda item was that there were perhaps some folks on the committee who had questions about whether we should think about pausing filling vacancies. And I'm very open-minded on this question. I'm very willing to be sort of persuaded that yes, we should continue to do this. But I recall that as the initial impetus for this agenda item, and I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I'd strongly encourage to keep hiring. You know, I think we're hiring individuals that are willing to work with kids, and I think we need to be able to support kids more than anything. And I think this is another opportunity to do that. You know, every time we hire a coach, you know, one of the things I really look at is people who care about kids and want to work with them. And I think, you know, if we pass on that opportunity, I think in some form, I mean, we can argue what level, but I think we're letting down kids and students. You know, we have individuals that want to be there, work with kids, and they're willing to do that. You know, I think it's important. I think it's critical. Our kids need our support, and I just think it's the right thing to do. You know, I don't think there's a lot of hiring left in this. You know, I know my spring coaches are pretty well set, but you know, I think it's important to do it. And the other thing is, sometimes you don't want to pass on the opportunity to get a very qualified individual in our school system. You know, I think it's important. If you have an opportunity to hire someone, I think you need to do it. Get them in place and start working with them so they can, you know, understand the school district and understand my expectations and what the kids need. So I just think it's important to keep doing it.
That's good enough for me. That sounds very reasonable. And thank you so much for what you're doing and for what all of our coaches are doing.
My pleasure.
Any other discussion or questions for Mr. Fuller? Ms. Wright?
Thank you. Just relating back to a question that was asked earlier, I think by member Physic about engagement metrics and attendance metrics, I'd be really curious as we analyze those numbers, if there's a way to overlay if folks are connected with the coach or not. I think based on what Athletic Director Fuller is telling us, you know, there's great opportunity there for those kiddos to really connect deeply with not just their teacher, but with their coach. And hopefully that's alleviating some of the teachers having to chase down folks not showing up and things like that. So just curious if when we do get that data back, if there's a way to analyze it that way as well.
Yeah, Jason, I don't know if your coaches are tracking any of that. I know in some cases, excuse me, coaches, I've heard from anecdotally that they're actually trying to support even more kids than would usually be on the team because they haven't gone through tryouts to make any cuts to minimize or to have the numbers for the team. The groupings can actually be bigger. So I don't know if there's a way to gather that data.
We haven't collected that number per se right now, but we can moving forward. We have a staff meeting Wednesday night, and I can ask them to just keep in mind how many kids are attending those meetings and contact numbers. Yep.
I know anecdotally too that some of the administration at the high school who are tracking students and their attendance and their grades sometimes their first stop is Mr. Fuller's office, because the best way to re-engage that student is to have the coach give them a call and say what's going on.
Any other discussion? Ms. Hawkins.
I just want to say really quickly to Mr. Fuller, and if he could pass it along to his staff, I think everybody here and everybody who's watching and everybody who has kids realizes just how outside the norm this year has been. And I, for one, am very grateful for the work that our coaches have chosen to do, you know, stepping off that field into being a little bit more flexible in how they deal with students and when and where. And that sort of commitment is what's going to help our kids get through this. So if anything, pass along our thanks and encourage them to keep it up, because this is hell on grown-ups. I can imagine what it's like for kids. So keep up the good work.
Can I just hop on that and just, you know, I'm here publicly. I'd like to thank the parents too. I think we always forget the parents sometimes. And I know our parents have been extremely flexible. Schedules have been very fluid in the athletic department, and that's just something I feel uncomfortable about. And parents have been able to work with the coaches and just understand the moving nature of this, and the parents and have been really supportive of the coaches and the kids. And I think they need some kudos as well in terms of what they've done to try to support their own children at home and their own athletes.
Thank you. If there's no other, oh, go ahead, Mr. Physick.
Before we move to the next agenda item, I think one of my questions to get answered from the COVID update. So I would just ask that if there's no other questions, I can just ask it again.
Yeah, I did also just realize that I never asked if any members of the public wanted to speak when we were doing the COVID update. So I was going to backtrack to that anyways. So if you want to go ahead first, and then I'll check if any members of the public wanted to speak.
Yeah, are the teachers back doing PD? And if they are, what kind of PD they're doing? Just curiosity.
So professional development has been very light and large in part optional. Of course, we're coming off a 2-week break. And just before that, we didn't have any Wednesday. So from December, going back here, we let out on the 22nd. So it had been a full week before that we had anything. But we have been intentional and deliberate in minimizing professional development, honoring the time of professionals to do the work they need to do to get things ready. And I consistently message that. And I know our building leaders have been working hard to preserve that. There have been some opportunities that I can actually support where they've gathered as contents or groups to say, here's how you can shrink some of the things that you need to do in your lesson planning. And I know Karen's helped coordinate some of that, and building leaders have coordinated that as well. So much lighter, I think, than certainly what we started with once we knew where people were at.
And are there any of the attendees that wanted to speak on the COVID update? I don't see any hands raised, but I wanted to at least offer it. Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 7, to receive and approve the second reading of policy section D. Ms. Ray?
So it doesn't look like I'm able to share my screen. I'm not sure if Dave's on the line or if Karen could make me a co-host. But this will be quick, or should maybe quick.
You should be able to now, Alicia.
Excellent, I got it. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share the document with you all. We went through a first reading where, well, I won't share it quite yet. A first reading where we accepted a large number of the changes, and there are 2 points that we want to review tonight. So now I'll go ahead and do that. All right, everyone have a visual on this? Yes, I'm seeing head nods. Great. So we left policy DA alone. I've gone ahead and updated the review date to tonight. First time writing out 2021. That was fun. Policy DB remains the same based on the revisions we made last meeting. Policy DD is where we get into our changes. The point that I want to draw your attention to is to teacher classroom mini grants. During our discussion, we talked about reducing the number from $25,000 to somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000. Chief Administrative Officer Bobby Avery and I took a look at that. And one thing we identified that might be helpful in understanding what kind of grants come in was reaching out to the Lewiston Education Fund, which is a local nonprofit that makes a lot of these teacher mini grants. And they let me know that their grants range in size, but kind of on the lower end is $1,000. So this seemed like a more appropriate threshold, but I do want to give the committee an opportunity to discuss that number since it's not in line with what we discussed at the meeting originally. So I'm going to stop my share so that Chair Parks can see if anyone does have inquiries about that.
I don't see anyone.
I don't see anyone either. Great. So we'll move ahead with that number. Thank you for the deference on that. Again, just changing the date for the adoption of this policy. And then the only other thing we discussed was the written language was the suggestion from the Maine School Board Association was to change good accounting practices to sound accounting practices. However, it sounded much more pleasant to say generally accepted in accounting terms. So I will again stop the share. Sorry for all the back and forth, just to see if anyone had any further comment on that from last time. And seeing none, the only other things are date changes that we're presenting to you. So this is it. All of these policies in section D with vote in the affirmative tonight would go forward. Our manual will be amended, and then we'll move on to our next set of policies.
Great. Mr. Madras-Collins.
I move that we accept policy D as presented.
And is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Mr. Beauplan. Oh, were you just voting? Okay, so we will start with Ward 1.
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5. We didn't hear you, Ms. Hawkins. You're opposite. You're muting it when you think you're unmuting it.
All right. Yes.
Thank you. Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7. I see you nodding, but can we get a verbal
Hey,
affirmative?
I apologize.
That's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. A?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Motion
Did you wanna-
passes 9-0.
Thank you. All right. Agenda item number 8, to receive an update on consent for the use of YouTube for educational purposes at Lewiston Public Schools.
Yeah, so several meetings ago, it was brought up that people were a bit surprised that we didn't allow YouTube as a tool for education, for learning. And so I did some exploration. We took the approach of passive consent by sharing letters out and messaging out, and parents can choose to not have their children have that access if they wish. We haven't opened that up yet. So as we got the consent out, we wanted to see what kind of volume we'd be looking at for people who said that they did not want to be part of this. We have so far not had any, but again, it's not opened up yet. And so I shared with you a brief memo in the packet that landed me, and I'll say this cautiously, that I believe that the benefits outweigh the risks from an educational perspective of allowing YouTube or YouTube access for our teachers and our students in our schools. I got an email from David last week that left me quite concerned. And so I guess I want to be upfront with everyone and say that while we have filtering, that filtering has limitations. It can be well intended, but it can let things through. And whether it's YouTube or other things, we have become aware and have had to work on some disciplinary related things because of things students have done with their laptops and Chromebooks and whatnot, the technology that we've given them, or on our networks, YouTube or other items. And so where YouTube is blocked right now, the real concern becomes the things that you can look up on YouTube that are not appropriate educationally. And David provided a number of examples, and if David, if you want to add some here, but I just share a couple that stood out to me. Some of the how-to videos can be how to do very illegal things. Some of the do-it-yourself videos can be how to do very inappropriate things, violent things, illicit things. And because, and on, your imagination can probably run. Where I landed with the benefit may outweigh the risk, or that outweighs the risk, is I do believe that kids, if they have those intentions, will find workarounds, and maybe it's not from YouTube, but it's from something else. I know I saw it a lot as a principal, and things that we had to deal with. If students work hard enough, they can get around certain things. We are well-intentioned in our filtering efforts. If we open this up, I want it to be 100% full disclosure to the committee and to the public that you're opening a bit of a Pandora's box, in that there's so many useful learning tools connected to what YouTube has to offer. But again, if used poorly or with bad intentions, it will open up the potential for students to access things that we would not otherwise want them to access. And there's implications to that. We have to make a good effort to filter things and protect students from things. There's federal law around that. Some federal law applies to some of our funding for E-rate and things of that nature that benefit schools for networks and equipment and purchasing, to the tune of, I believe Bobby said it was millions of dollars. So we'd want to make sure that we're compliant with our efforts around that. So I asked Dave, can we filter these things? And Dave said, sure. He kind of chuckled, but there's something to the tune of 500 hours of video uploaded to YouTube, like a minute or an hour. I forget what it was, but it's an obscene amount. And there's no way anybody could filter everything that's coming through those channels. And so we can go in and block things if we see it come up, but we also can't make it a full-time job. Back when we get back to normal, if we have between 1,500 and 2,000 kids on campus at the high school and the technical center, searches and inquiries, it'd be a full-time job just trying to block what kids are kind of snooping around for, if they're snooping around for things. So I wanted to put it out there to you, full disclosure, that if we open this, that it's open, and there are some things in there that we may not want our children to be looking at. And we'll do our best to filter them, but it'll be a possibility. And I want to give Dave a chance and Bobby a chance for sure, and Karen if she wants to add to that.
Bobby, go ahead.
Dave, I'm going to just start with the funding, and then you can talk about SIPA and all else. But so it's not millions, but it's $1 million. It's very, very close to $1 million. And we are obligated to, in order to receive that $1 million, we're obligated to comply with the SIPA law, which is the Child Internet Protection Act. And this would make it, well, Dave, is it fair to say this will make it impossible to comply? Is that fair to say?
I'd say that's fair to say. I have some things I'll show. Yeah. Would you like me to do that now? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen just really quickly, and I'll try to be mindful of time as well. So make sure I got the right one first here. Yep. Can you see my talking points through here that just came up? Okay. So
Very
basically,
tiny. Can you make it
is it
slightly
tiny?
bigger?
I can make that bigger. Yes. Let's see. Let's go to view and enter full screen. Full screen didn't give me what I wanted though. Let's go to view.
Dave, the lower right
Let's
corner.
go zoom.
Zoom in.
Yeah, I could have done zooming down there. Here we go. How's that?
Better, thank you.
Better? Okay, so just real quick, and I won't read this word for word through the whole thing, but we were committed and from the tech department to making YouTube available. I mean, I agree with the remarks that Jake made about our, former tech integrator here. I really want to make sure we're giving our teachers as many tools and our students as many tools as possible. And so we were committed over the break to get this up and running. And unfortunately, the more we got into it, the more concern came about. And you can see we tried 3 different options of looking at things here. One is what they call restricted mode, which is through G Suite. It's in the admin controls that we have for our G Suite portal. And we started testing out restricted mode. We actually set it up so we could test it on a student device, on a staff device, and go through we put it through its paces. My guys worked really, really hard with this to try to make sure they could check out everything. And immediately after enabling restricted mode, they were on a student device, and suddenly they were seeing mature content that, and pretty nasty stuff that wasn't being blocked. And it surprised me even that restricted mode through YouTube wouldn't have been even better. And that was allowing this stuff through. And there's also self-harm videos. I mean, there was one video that, was pretty disturbing on what it would teach a kid to be able to do. And then just other inappropriate material. So given that we weren't seeing what we would like to see with restricted mode, we decided to look at our own content filter, which is the light speed filter that we have that filters all of our content throughout the district. And they had a feature in there called Smart Play that was supposed to do very similar things to what restricted mode for YouTube does. So we enabled Smart Play and tried to filter through Smart Play, and we were shocked. We found it to be extremely unrestricted, and the light speed algorithms and it's in the internal databases that are supposed to flag and block content really weren't doing that well at all. So we were left with option 3, and option 3 was no filtering at all and allowing straight up allowing YouTube content. Now, we were looking at this with the assumption that this was going to be K through 12 and that this was going to be available for all students. And that even made it more disturbing for us because there are laws when you get to under 13 years of age that come into play, as well as laws for students who are in the middle school and high school and so forth. So those are the 3 choices that we had. And this is kind of where Bobby was alluding to the legal concerns. We have 2 things that come into play as far as legal concerns. One is the piece that Jake mentioned, the consent to use the service. YouTube is considered an additional service provided by Google. It's not part of our G Suite apps that we have that come with our G Suite subscription, so to speak. And so you have to abide by some different terms of service when you get into the additional services such as YouTube. And just to give you an example, this is the first thing I saw when I had to, and my staff looked at me and said, this is what's going to come up. Now we got to, make a decision on whether we agree with this. And YouTube spells it right out. It says to the G Suite administrator that YouTube is an additional service not covered by the organization's G Suite for Education agreement. Talks about the privacy notification. And if you look at these 2 bullet points, it's if you have end users under the age of 18, your institution is required under its Google Workspace agreement to get parental consent before allowing these users to use YouTube. One way Jake was talking about was passive consent, which basically you put out there that says, we're going to be using this tool with your son or daughter. If you have concerns, please contact us. I don't know if it solves this wholly. It certainly is an attempt to do it, but that's one piece of it. But down here is where it really gets kind of concerning. It says you acknowledge and agree that you comply with all laws and regulations that apply to your provision of YouTube to your end users, including, as applicable, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, so FERPA, and then the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, which deals with children under the age of 13. And the other one that should be right here as well is SIPA. And SIPR is the Children's Internet Protection Act. And SIPR basically requires that you filter all traffic. And so I'll go back up here. No, actually, I'm going to go down. I'm going to actually go back. So SIPA says, you know, and we have to sign it every year. And if you look where it says on this block 2 certification and signature, that's right off the document that unfortunately Jake has to sign every year, or the superintendent has to sign. And it basically says that document, which we've already sent into the federal government, I certify at this date and start of discounted services. And it talks about the recipient of service under my administration authority represented by the funding request numbers. And then down, if you look, compiled with the requirements of the Children's Internet Protection Act. And so what the Internet Protection Act says is you must filter content. And I'll show you that in a minute. But that's the real key piece. Actually, I should probably just change the screen I'm sharing so that I can show you that right now. Now that I think about it, it'll be more pertinent if I do that now. Can you see this document now? SIPA requirements for schools.
Yes.
Yes. So look at the very top one. It says Internet Filtering Technology Protection Methods. Requirement, a technology protection measure such as internet filtering software. And it says a protection measure must be in place to block or filter internet access by adults and minors to visual depictions that are obscene, child pornography, or harmful to minors, with respect to the use of computers with internet access by minors. The filter must be applied to all computers, not just computers used by students. It can be temporarily disabled for adults engaged in bona fide research or other lawful purposes. And what it says is acceptable proof is that you have an invoice showing that you paid for the filtering equipment or the software, and you could be asked to provide filtering logs and screenshots of the filtering settings. So that's the concern that we always have. I'll go back to the original document and finish up. So part of the ties right into that is the fact that we have to certify every year that we do this in order to get our E-rate funding. And E-rate is a program through the federal government that provides funding for 2 things: for broadband internet connections coming to the school buildings. And then there's what we call category 2, which is the actual equipment in our server rooms and so forth, and that allow us to bring that internet, that broadband connectivity into the building and throughout all the classrooms and so forth. So that's what that is all about. And if you look right here, they put this last statement in there. If your school is selected for audit, you must have documentation to support your SIPA compliance. Failure to provide documentation may result in the loss of continued E-rate funding and/or obligate your school to reimburse the full cost for internet services for any fiscal year in which your school was not found to be, non-compliant. So that's kind of the concerns that we came up with when we started looking through this and found that we couldn't filter YouTube really effectively in any of the manners that we looked through. So that's just a piece I wanted to share with the committee.
Ms. Ray?
Thank you. So I think now I'm just thinking of workarounds, because I don't think it would be great to move forward with YouTube. Is there any chance of giving YouTube access just to staff with some sort of password system, having them, I think you can download from YouTube and then have them upload it to Vimeo? Is that have different permission settings? It's just the one that I'm most familiar with.
So teachers do have that right now. We've allowed YouTube for all staff in the district, so they do have access to YouTube. They have to be careful, some copyright situations, you know, when they download a video and downloading a video and reposting it to the web does break copyright. That's one of the concerns.
One example of that, just real quickly, last spring when we were living COVID, we had students that were trying to get ready for their AP exams, and all of the supports that were put out by the College Board for the AP prep were YouTube videos, and our kids couldn't access them. So we look for a way.
Copyright, at least some part of copyright law has been suspended during COVID because there's been access issues. So I wouldn't worry I personally don't worry as much about violating copyright law in the middle of a global pandemic as I do potentially exposing children to this material or also losing $1 million in funding. I'm okay to bend some rules, I guess, but not others, I would say. And I would encourage folks to think creatively about that too.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for presenting on that. I think that it would be a mistake for Lewiston Public Schools to allow for YouTube to be a part of curriculum, I guess. And if we are putting work out there, I would think that we should have other resources for our teachers and our students. So it's scary. I don't want to be any part of allowing kids to view those things. So that's where I stand.
Mr. Beaupelon? Can you unmute? There we go.
I apologize.
That's
Dave,
okay.
Sorry. Dave, what are neighboring school districts doing on this?
So I know that one neighboring school district is using restricted mode where the teachers have to approve the video. So I know that and quite honestly, I think that it's all about what level of risk you're willing to undertake in your school district. I think that's what it really comes down to. Some school districts are willing to take the risk. Other school districts see it a little differently once they see the laws around it and the information I shared as far as concern. I mean, there's different levels. It really is. It's across the gamut.
Mr. Major, were you done, Mr. Beaupelon? Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Majoris Collins.
Dave, what website is this meeting streaming on right now?
Zoom, YouTube.
Yep. Look, I get people's concerns, but I think it's important for us to live in the real world for a second. I'm the youngest member of this committee. Folks in my generation have virtual universal access to YouTube. Folks in the generation below mine, from what I've seen, seem to have the same. I think it's if our concerns are about the dangers of exposing kids to YouTube, I think that is, quite frankly, something of a joke. I mean, I think there are real dangers to it, but I think the idea that our district not providing YouTube access is preventing any of our students from accessing YouTube is absurd. I take the legal ramifications slightly more seriously, but based on the initial reading that we just heard, it seems that, if the district is making a good faith effort, if we have blocking software in place, that we're in compliance. And I sort of have a hard time believing that, every school district in America is, not allowing students to use YouTube. I remember when I was in school, YouTube was an essential part of being able to, all kinds of different things, from research to just listening to music while you're writing a paper. I think that it's very easy to get scared about things on the internet, but the reality is that if without opening up access to YouTube, we still have situations where a kid could be exposed to something that we wouldn't want them to be exposed to, and I think that it's. I mean, it boggles the mind to think that students aren't walking around, almost every single one of them from 7th grade up with a phone in their pocket that can access YouTube any hour of the day, and to say that we're not going to allow it for educational use in the schools, we're not going to allow it for the benefit of our students' education, because we're concerned about what they might see on YouTube, when they go home and they watch YouTube for 8 hours straight. I mean, I just, that seems so patently absurd to me that I don't even know where to begin with it.
Ms. Hawkins.
Yeah, I agree somewhat with what Kieran's saying, but I also see from a mom's point of view, being as my 13-year-old came to visit and I had to remove access to YouTube from my smart TV because I took my eyes off of him and came back into something he should not have been watching at 13. A lot of this is going to require, parents to actually be aware, and passive consent works, it doesn't. And kids are going to be kids. I know when my son started middle school in Auburn, within 2 days of getting his, I think it was an iPad, I don't remember, one of his friends was already getting called in because he'd made a workaround and was accessing things he wasn't supposed to. So very much like David said, Mr. Beauplan said, they're going to find a way to do it, whether or not we want them to. The point is, are we protecting ourselves? Clearly, what's already in place is insufficient. But I'm not really sure we have the money to, or the wherewithal to go and buy new software, to put filtering in place, to cover our that place without, getting into a situation we can't handle. We're hitting a point of, can we deal with it? Is it really our job? Yeah, we shouldn't be, actively providing them access, but at the same time, we're not. We've got restrictions in place. We tell them this is for education only. What they do beyond that is very much on the parents and the students themselves. That's kind of the problem, though. So I get what Kieran has to say. I get very much what David has to say. I mean, if we had it set up to where they had to get an okay for every video they pulled up, that's going to eat up a whole lot of time for somebody. And I know we don't have the resources to create that sort of monitoring program. So,
Mr. Potman.
Yeah, just my 2 cents, and that is that, I've always admitted I'm not much of a technology person. And when it comes to something like this, and I've watched the evils of the internet and of Facebook and of everything else that's out there, and the garbage that people put on there and what would be available. If students have the ability to go to Facebook at home, let them do it. If they can do it at the library, let them do it. If they can do it on their phone, let them do it. We have a decision as a school committee to decide what we're going to take on ourselves. And we have a responsibility to the parents that we're not going to provide that avenue for them to go down a slippery slope when we don't have full command and restriction on any of these items, with all of us knowing what's out there on the internet. It's just, there has to be a line drawn, and absolutely no way will I support this.
Mr. Damon.
Yeah, I would agree with Ron. I don't disagree that it's available through other sources. I don't believe that the school committee or that the Lewiston Public Schools needs to be the primary facilitator of access, and I won't support it.
Mr. Majerus-Collins, and then Mr. Beauplan.
Is this committee prepared to ban cell phones in Lewiston schools? Because, I mean, if folks are genuinely concerned about, the possibility that through schools, students might access things that we would prefer that they not access, we can do that. We can have a, technological wall at the door and say, inside the school, it is, 1975. But I think that that's not the right way to go. I also think that there is a big difference between internet platforms that have minimal educational value with, access to questionable material, and internet platforms that have extensive educational value and also have access to questionable material. And YouTube clearly falls in the latter category. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been hearing complaints about this from teachers and students. You know, I think that I would really encourage the committee to look at what other districts are doing. You know, if it's the case that no school districts in America are letting their kids access YouTube, then, you know, we obviously shouldn't be the first. But if this is a commonplace thing, if districts like Portland, Bangor, Auburn, South Portland, Brunswick, you know, Augusta, if there are other districts in the state that are letting kids access YouTube and reaping the educational benefits of that, I think that we ought to go ahead and do that, unless this committee is prepared to say absolutely no internet accessible technology in the school, no matter what. You know, everybody put their phone in a locker at the when they walk in, and I don't think that folks are willing to do that. So.
I don't know if you want to go first, Jake, or let Mr. Beauplan go first.
If I could just sneak in, because I want to echo the point that Kieran had made, that, you know, and I'll say it publicly, that I wrote in the memo that I do think the benefits outweigh the risks, but I want you to have some foundation for my thinking that way. One is we have numerous acceptable use policy violations every single year with what is currently available to kids, between the equipment we provide them, bypassing VPNs, our filter, you name it. We have numerous tech violations every single year in every single school. So I guess I don't want this conversation to land in a space that, you know, people think Jake's crazy because I've opened up, you know, the devil's den. But I guess I want to be clear with people that the reason I thought that way is I think there is massive benefit to YouTube's educational platform, and the things that kids can access via YouTube. Right now, they're finding ways to find it through other means using our equipment in our network. And that's not anything on tech. They're working very hard to filter these things. I also want to include that there are filtering limitations. A couple of questions I was going to ask was, you know, do we allow it, do we not, to the board, but also maybe an age consideration. So above a certain age, with what kind of signature or permission. But there's also limitations to our filtering system as a network. So one of the things I asked Dave in the years past was, well, can we get this 20 kids permission to do the AP prep? And so Dave actually went and dug and tried to do that, but he couldn't. It was all on or all off. So there are some limitations to what the filtering system will do.
Paul, go ahead. You have to unmute first, though. Thank you.
As everyone here has gathered, the panelists and the attendees and the technological Luddite of the group, and even I, in my day job across the river, have seen and endorsed the value of YouTube as an educational device. If because of COVID and the policy across the river of combining a whole school year into one semester, and I have 7 minutes to cover the Truman administration, I need things like YouTube for support. If I'm still doing standards because they're a requirement, and I'm doing an effective leader project, and I have Napoleon and Julius Caesar and Genghis Khan, and another one escapes me right now, I cannot spend a whole lot of time on that, and I need kids to do research on their own. And vehicles such as TED Talks and other things, if you explore that, are valid, very good educational support. So I would advocate to the group that we not throw out the baby with the bathwater on this one, that there is a much value to YouTube. Thank you.
Miss Wright?
Sorry, it's hard with the background to make my hand seen. Can I ask Chief Administrative Officer Avery, if we were to put a restricted or filter on YouTube, even though Dave's team has proved it doesn't work, does that cover us in terms of making a good faith effort, or no?
We could, but we can't. It's not possible. And the box that David showed that Jake will have to check every year, he won't be able to check that. And there's a chance that we'll lose our E-rate funding for future years.
Okay. And then my second thing was just going to be asking the chair if we could hear from the public on this matter. I think there's a lot of people here, so maybe they can guide us a little bit.
Definitely. I first really quickly wanted to mention, I see a huge educational benefit to YouTube. I know even when I was in school, which was a little bit a while ago in college, that I started using YouTube quite a bit. So I know that there's a huge educational value to it. As the parent to an 11-year-old who will find all of those inappropriate things you don't want your kids to find within 2 minutes of being on YouTube, my perspective is a little bit different. I think that like Jake said, that the value does outweigh the risk. The benefit does outweigh the risk. But one of the things that I would like to stress is if we do move forward with allowing students to have access to YouTube, I would like to see a definitive consent process from parents and not the assumed or implied consent, because I know that parents often will just go through and agree to things without really knowing what they're agreeing to, or they might give the perception that they agree to it until their student stumbles upon something that they find extremely offensive, and then it's going to change. Their perspective will change pretty quickly. So I think that if we do move forward with allowing full access to YouTube, we should have a very clearly well-defined consent process for parents to say that they do want their children to have access to all of the things that they might have access to. I do see one hand raised for attendees.
Janet, you're free to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so Janet Bowden, Ward 2. I just wanted to weigh in with my own experience with YouTube with my children. Both of my daughters, one is elementary age, one is high school age, have their own laptops. They're not using Chromebooks that the school provided. And so in saying that, you can just imagine they have access to anything that they want when they're home, because they're home and they're remote at the moment. And for my high schooler, I know she finds it extremely useful being able to go on YouTube and look up different things to understand what she's doing better. For my elementary school child, she doesn't use that for educational purposes whatsoever. So I would say if you're going to allow YouTube, I think it's better at a high school level, maybe at middle school level, but maybe not at an elementary school level. So that's all I had to say about that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I see you, Tanya, but I think we're going to go down the list of public hands raised first.
Rachel?
Hi. I feel like I'm participating in these meetings a lot lately. Okay, so I teach a special education science class at Lewiston High. And because I haven't had access to YouTube, well, I have access to use YouTube, but my students don't. I've had to make a lot of my own videos. So, for example, over vacation, I spent a number of hours over a period of 3 days over my vacation when I should be vacating and resting and relaxing, making videos, video labs for my science class, because I think that's the best way to do it right now. That's all unpaid time. I mean, I think the videos are great. The kids seem to love them. They think I should start my own YouTube channel, but what would be the point? But it's still all unpaid time over my own vacation that I have to make my own videos for my class. When I know I can search, actually I search YouTube and I find how to do the video and then I replicate it in my own video. So, and then I have to put in all of this unpaid time to make my own videos, to replicate a video that's already on YouTube. And this committee has been unwilling to pay teachers for the extra time we've had to spend to make remote education happen. This committee has not wanted this. The issue has been brought up over and over again that we should be paying teachers for our time that we're spending outside of our regular work time, and that's been shot down. So you guys are going to make a decision, because it can't keep going like this. And I only make a very few videos, and I know elementary school teachers who are doing many, many more than I am, and are spending a lot more time doing it than I am. So that's something to take into consideration as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Aisha?
I dare not unmute because children are screaming in the background, so I apologize in advance. My name is Aisha Hall. I'm speaking as a parent right now too, but I am the social emotional learning and equity resource coordinator, but I feel like all of that goes together. And I don't think I'll be able to say anything that we haven't addressed here, but I will say that there was a time where internet was something that we were fearful of, and we figured out, thank you guys, and we figured out how to make it happen. Right now, YouTube is not, it's not realistic to not have YouTube in our world, and it makes it inconvenient. And I fear as a parent that I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to make this work so my kids can stay ahead of that curve or even on that curve. So I'm speaking as a parent. However, I also had an incident with my 10-year-old son where I'm calling Cindy Gish and saying, hey, shut him down. He's been on the internet. I don't want him doing anything. So I've been in that space where I don't feel like I've had control, but I know that this is something that my student needs. And so one thing that I would say is, right, YouTube is a reality to us. It's not going anywhere. And we have to figure out together how we're going to help our students, I guess, navigate this new social dynamic that we've had, because we're now remote. We're now virtual. There is no, I don't know what to do as a parent to accommodate or put in place something for my student to do the things that I would like him to do and learn the things that I would like him to learn outside of the school building. And that was already difficult. Now they're home and I am that teacher. We need support as parents to, yeah, of course, I want to say don't, but if we are going to do this, we need to make sure we're doing this as a village, and we need to make sure that the boundaries that we set, the boundaries and the skills that we're teaching our students, whether it be in high school or even my 7 or 8 year old, that they have those skills, and that we all agree that those are norms, and we can create positive norms around how we navigate YouTube and the internet overall. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha. Kira, is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kira Soramato, and I'm a 6th grade teacher at McMahon Elementary. I definitely see the value of YouTube. All too often, I am looking for videos to teach content, and frequently the most effective videos to teach some of the concepts I'm looking for are on YouTube channels. We use the Lucy Calkins reading and writing units of study, and the writing unit of study focuses on teen activism in 6th grade. And one of the things in a recent training I took that they talked about was these text sets that we built for your students to research are 10 years old. And it's a combination of articles, videos, interactive texts, podcasts. And she said many issues have come up that your teens are probably going to be much more invested in. Create new text sets. Well, when you look for videos that talk about teen activism, videos by Marley Diaz, who's a very popular current teen activist, those videos are on YouTube. Now, the workaround that I found at first was using Screencastify, but unfortunately, my school-issued laptop is too slow, so everyone speaking starts to sound like this as they, as you record. So I have taken to, on my own time, screen recording all of these YouTube videos that I have pre-screened and I know are safe on my iPhone, uploading them to my Google Drive and connecting them to Google Classroom so that my students have access. There is a workaround that allows teachers to screen and that kind of provides for safety. The downside is that's time consuming. When I recently tried to create 20 new, or I think 15 new text sets, each of which I wanted to have a minimum of 3 videos, that is 45 videos, and they ranged in time from 3 to 15 minutes. That was hours upon hours upon hours of capturing and uploading to give my students access to that content. So I definitely understand the fears about inappropriate content. There have been times on my staff computer with safe search on that I have searched for things and things have popped up in my YouTube searches that I'm like, I don't want to see that. I know I don't want my students exposed to that. But the opposite thing is I spent probably 15 to 20 hours capturing videos over the holiday break to get these tech sets ready. So it really does fit both sides. There are workarounds that allow us to access those videos, but those workarounds are time consuming and there aren't enough hours in my teacher day to do that work to adequately supply my students with the resources they need. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kira. I believe that's the last hand. Nope, one more. Kimberly?
Yes, hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Kimberly Rand, and I am a special education teacher at McMahon School. And I had a question, and it's probably for Dave. Is there a way for you to limit the access to YouTube for students on their laptops other than links that teachers are giving them to go on?
In other words, to limit what they can see on YouTube?
Right. So as a teacher, if I were to upload a YouTube link into Seesaw, that they could just access that link alone.
Yeah, that's a difficulty, and that's what Bobby was talking about earlier. You know, you go into the Google Management Suite, and it's basically it's the on or off. I could look. I believe that we can turn it on and off for either 9th grade to 12th grade, or actually K to 8, because K to 8 is on a different domain, Google domain, which is basically our at lpsk6.org domain, and the high school is on lewistonpublicschools.org domain. So that's the only split we have where it can be on for one and off for the other. But as far as filtering it down so that when there's a link put into YouTube, into a Google Classroom, the kids still need to have YouTube turned on to be able to access that link. We can't make just, I wish we could, because that would be the easy solution right there. But we can't
Yes, it
make
would.
just that link. Yeah, it'd be perfect. Unfortunately, we can't do it per link.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I just, as a teacher, I can see the dangers, especially in the elementary realm, but also as a parent who has, you know, had 3 different children of mine go through high school, middle school, and high school, I can also see the dangers in that. So I would probably have to say that even though it is a really good tool, maybe it should be something that we, you know, tell them they can access on a device they have at home that is a cell phone or their parents' device or their personal device. But I don't think that it would be wise for us to allow them to do it on a school device. So, and I do realize that there are families out there that their only device to access the internet and do research is the school device. So I do know that that would cause some problems, but I really do think that with all of the things that's on YouTube that is dangerous to children, I think it would be better for them to access it on a personal device and not a school device. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands. Okay. Dave, I have one question, and this may show that I'm really computer illiterate, even though I don't think I am. If students are attending anything remote through the different platforms, or like, okay, let me simplify it. Right now on this session, let's say all of our laptops were had YouTube blocked. If you went and accessed a YouTube video and shared your screen, would we be able to see it? If it's blocked for us but not blocked for you, would we still be able to view it?
So if it was blocked for you, let's say all of you had a school device at home right now and you were using a school device, and we had blocked YouTube for the, what we call the organization, the OU, that you're in. As far as Google, we put people, just think of it this way, in certain folders. They're called OUs. But when we put you in that certain folder, we give you certain permissions. Okay. And the permissions we would give to your OU, which would be the school committee. Let's say we said no YouTube for the school committee, and you were on a school device, you couldn't see it. You'd click on
Even
it.
if you shared it, okay.
Right. However, obviously, we don't have that restriction on you now. Clearly, you're actually participating in the Zoom session right now. All of you are participating in a Zoom session. But and you can go to YouTube right now and you can see the YouTube stream. It'll be a 20-second delay, but you can see the YouTube stream. But if we shut it down, obviously you wouldn't be able to see that YouTube stream. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I was just trying to see if there was some kind of a workaround where teachers had access, but students didn't, but teachers were still able to share it indirectly with students. But I think you answered my question. Thank you. Ms. Ray?
I felt like there was a different answer to your question, Chair Parks. Were you asking if they could send the link through Zoom or if they could screencast it through Zoom? Because you can screencast it and you would be able to see it.
I was asking about screencasting, yes.
Yeah, you can
not
do
having
that.
the students click on a link, but having the students just view it.
If I were playing a YouTube video and I shared my screen, you would see it, no matter what
Absolutely.
your permissions are.
Okay.
Yep. Like I showed you that document screen sharing. I could have had a YouTube video playing, and let's say as a classroom teacher, I really want, even right now, if I was a classroom teacher, I really want my kids to see this video. So while I'm conducting my lesson in a Zoom session, I just share my screen and they can watch the video on YouTube. Yes.
Okay.
And Dave, we're set up for that currently, correct?
Yes, because basically you're using Zoom. You're not really using YouTube.
I mean, the same thing would apply if you put it in a PowerPoint and played it from there for your class. The class I was just in before the break, the teacher had a PowerPoint and showed them how to go through and submit their assignments, things like that. Like you would be able to see it that way, but it would have to be synchronous learning is the only thing to Chair Parks' question.
Way back when Dave Terry was still in the classroom, I absolutely embedded all kinds of YouTube videos into my PowerPoints that I showed in the classroom only, but I could start the video right from my PowerPoint and show it. Worked out really neat.
So there are some workarounds, but they're somewhat complicated.
Time consuming. I think that teacher that spoke was right.
Okay. Ms.
Sorry,
Ray.
I had a question, but then wanted to answer that part because it seemed like, yeah, sorry. So my question to Superintendent Langless would be, how would you answer this question on this form based on what we're potentially talking about having YouTube as a part of our educational toolbox?
To that specific question, I mean, I think teachers are doing that now. They think the problem is they can't provide it. They have to do it live. So I think to put an assignment in with a couple of videos to support you if you're struggling, right now teachers don't have that ability. They have to make those videos themselves, or they can do it live. There are some workarounds, but again, they are very time consuming to pull it up, choose it, watch it, record it, download it, upload it, whatever, would be all of the steps you need to do to put one video on a Google Classroom. And I know the association has brought this up, and we were working to try to expedite it. We ran into some roadblocks, obviously.
Okay, but if the school committee says YouTube, go for it, how are you? And I mean, we don't have it in our packet, so I'm being very vague, I feel like, but the form that Dave showed us where you have to check a box and you have to sign as the superintendent, how would you answer that?
If we move forward with YouTube, I would be looking at making sure our filtering covers the expectation. I think the challenge that we face right now, and the challenge that I see is, Dave and his team, they're knowledgeable that it will not filter as it currently sits the way it is needed to be done. The hardship that I have is I know of things that right now don't currently filter the way things would need to be done. So I have a bit of a hardship that I even signed it the first time. Dave and I have worked on at least 2 or 3 cases this year of kids using devices very inappropriately. And that's with the protections in place. And so I'm torn a little bit between, okay, we're talking about YouTube, but I already know these things happen. And so what's the major difference? What's the divisive piece to it? So from a SIPA perspective, or COPPA or FERPA, there's already things that go on now that are challenging. So for instance, when we talked earlier about if there was an audit and they found that we have opened up YouTube, I am curious what would be the result of that if we do make a good faith effort to filter it like we make a good faith effort now. If you took a student device and you went into Google and you searched enough, you can get to places and find things that we don't want you looking at. And those are some of the things that Dave's team gets to flag. And we do our best to track them down. I guess that's the hardship. It's we already have a little bit of poison in the water. We're saying don't add any poison because that would be wrong, but there's poison in the water now. And so to act like opening YouTube would make us non-compliant, I agree it's a challenge. I'd love to see if we can figure it out. But it would be naive to say that kids are not accessing inappropriate things with our current structures.
Is it okay if I add one more?
Yes.
Okay, and so SIPA is federal legislation, correct? Okay, and so is there any potential that we should open a dialogue with our federal delegation about that moving forward? I think pre-COVID, this wouldn't have come to the school committee, I don't think. We wouldn't be talking about this. I don't know, maybe it would have. But I think we've got a really responsive delegation. And so if it's worth opening that dialogue with them, I'm not sure who would do that, but it might be worth looking at as a future solution so we don't jeopardize our funding by doing something.
Could definitely be worth reaching out to others. Dave, YouTube was available until when? Was it
it was only, yeah, we shut it down a couple of years ago. And the reason we shut it down, maybe 3 years ago now, I'm not sure. The reason we shut it down was we got a message from Google specifically saying, our terms of service, be aware of our terms of service. This is what's, and they put it out and they sent it directly to me and some others. I don't know if it was Bill Webster as well, but based on that notification from Google, we took a second look at things. And that's when we shut it down. And yeah, so. And I think that,
sorry.
I don't know about reaching out to our delegation, but we have our own legal team that I'm sure Jake has reached out to, and that would probably be the first place to start. Jake, I don't know. I'll leave it that to you. But.
Miss Litton has her hand raised.
You're all set, Allison.
I too have loud children, so apologies in advance if they make a cameo. But I'm Allison Litton, LEA president, family engagement coordinator at Connors, and parent of 2 LPS students. Superintendent Langlis is correct that this is something that the association has been advocating on for quite some time. We've heard from a number of educators, some who have spoken tonight, that the lack of access to this, particularly with remote learning at this time, is really a burden. And 15 to 20 hours to get students the resources that they need to access the curriculum that we're tasked with teaching is not reasonable. I think we really need to dig deep and look at what other districts are doing at this point that is making this an acceptable process. I'm aware that SIPA also has a digital citizenship curriculum component that is mandatory. That's another box that needs to be checked and needs to be signed off. That began back in 2012, and the language surrounding that states that internet safety policies must be provided for educating minors about appropriate online behavior, including interacting with other individuals on social networking websites and in chat rooms, and cyberbullying awareness and response. So if we're doing that part, then YouTube should be something that should be accessible. And will there be teachable moments in access? Absolutely, just like there has been and will continue to be until the end of time. You know, my 7-year-old has access to kids YouTube. Even with that, I have it monitored very closely. He's never out of my listening with anything, and that's my responsibility as a parent. So as an educator as well, I mean, we take on some of that responsibility for our students. And we also need our parents when they do sign off on that. And Chair Parks had a great, you know, comment about, we really need parents to understand this, and it can't just be an implied consent. We do ask for usage to be checked off, initialed, whatnot, once a year. If we don't have that, then, you know, we assume kids aren't using it. But as a district, we do need to step up with making sure that parents are understanding that we can't use this as an opportunity to widen the equity gap, which is part of what I'm hearing tonight. And I'm really concerned about that, particularly for the students that I have served in my time in the district, at Longley, at Martell, and now at Connors. Expecting a student to have access to either a home device or to the public library is just not reasonable, especially if the content is something that we're requiring that they have access to for the standards that we are teaching and the standards that we're grading them on. So I understand this is a complex issue, but you know, I've heard a couple folks say they're just not willing to support it, and I would really ask you to be more open to the conversation than that. And sorry, my loud children, but you know, that it makes me nervous to have things shut down automatically when there's evidently ways across our state and across our country that school districts are making this work. So please consider all aspects of this. You know, if it's a decision that needs more information, then let's gather that quickly and let's gather that together. But, you know, don't just decide, nope, not touching it. There's got to be something. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And there's one more hand.
How you're free to speak.
Hi, thank you. I really do support, you know, children having, students having access to YouTube, because that helps a lot of, for example, like some, you know, families, younger kids who are relying on the school device where they can use YouTube educational. And I know some parents do monitor that, and some of them, that's the only technology they have hands that they can use. And also, for example, like some of the kids who are in high school, if they're using inappropriate and YouTube, and I know technology, you know, person Dave and his team, they always monitor that. And if a child is using inappropriate websites, they lose that privilege. So in having that access for all, and I think it shouldn't be taken away. Thank you.
Abby?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Abby. I'm a reading recovery teacher in the district, and I'm also a parent of 2 kiddos. And for me to be able to work in the district, I have my kids go to daycare to receive their instruction. And yes, we have access to devices at home, but we do not feel comfortable sending our personal devices to daycare. So we use school devices. And I know there are a lot of families in the same situation. So on top of what Allison's talking about with our lower economic status kids, even the everyday kids that might have multiple devices, they don't have access to those at daycare. And that's going to be putting a huge burden on daycare providers to provide that, because I do know that our daycare provider, before we had school access tablets, and actually after, before we realized that YouTube links were not working, was actually using her own personal phone for my kids to be able to watch those videos. And it's an in-home daycare, but she had multiple kids that needed to use those. So I think it's a bigger issue, and it's a really big issue, to be thinking that we can just have access to other devices. It's not that easy, because of where our kids are getting their learning.
Thank you.
Thank
Abby.
you. Mr. Potman, did you still have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. So I feel amiss if I don't take the time for two specific points. This item's very personal to me. In the mid-90s, as a lobbyist in Washington, I worked for an organization that tried very, very hard to put limitations and restrictions on at the advent of the internet when it came about. And the amount of friction that we got, the fight back to allow the free speech, to allow to be able to do what you want to do on the internet. What frightened me was the stories that came at the advent of the internet, and I don't think they've gotten any better. And I can say that because of 30 years of law enforcement, and Elgin, I don't know if you want to chime in here. 30 years in 3 jurisdictions in Massachusetts and Maine. I've had my share of dealing with sexual predators. And let me tell you all, they love the internet and they love YouTube. They love making those connections. They will make those connections. And there's nothing that's preventing a lot of it. And we can't prevent the kids once they leave the school from what they do, but we can prevent the children and protect the children as school committee members with what we're responsible for in the school department.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus-Collins, do you have another comment, or are you just going to reiterate what you've already said?
No, I raised my hand because I have another comment.
Okay, perfect.
So I want to point out that folks who are concerned about violations of federal law should understand that the district is under your interpretation already in violation of federal law. You know, I think that Superintendent Langlis's point bears closer scrutiny, that, you know, the district is already handing out devices that, with, you know, ingenuity and work ethic, students can access things that they should not be able to access. And if the standard for compliance with federal law is successfully preventing 100% of student access to objectionable material, we are already out of compliance and our funding is already threatened. So if that is the perspective of school committee members, then I encourage them to go ahead and yank the devices back, close down the internet servers, and take our district offline. And if we're not prepared to do that, then adding YouTube is not adding any legal risk. It's only allowing students and staff members to have access to a powerful educational tool. And there is no doubt, and no one should go into this blind, that YouTube is also a powerful tool for ill in the world, as Member Potvin rightly points out. But our students already have access to this kind of material on our devices right now through our network. And if the standard is successfully preventing any access to objectionable material, we're already out of compliance, and we ought to send a check back to the federal government. I don't think that's what the standard is. I think the standard is a good faith effort. I think the standard is, you know, being responsible, being in line with the guidelines from the federal government, with the guidelines from the state, with the best practices of other school districts. But if folks want to take a more conservative approach and say we're not going to tolerate any risk, then we should close down the laptops, close down the servers, and take the schools back to the pre-internet age.
Thank you. Mr. Physick.
All right. So I guess I've been hearing both points of view, and one thing for me, from my background and stuff, and a lot of other things, I know we just can't be scared of the internet. And so, with that said, I think a lot of good outweighs the bad, and I think, like anything else, you have to monitor it, whether it's the district or whether it's parents. And I think it's been said that people are going to access stuff no matter what, whether we have YouTube or not. I think it's a great tool to have. And I would support to have YouTube. I would also support of having having every parent get permission for that, instead of kind of the I forget what's called, passive permission or whatever it was called. So it's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Dave?
I just want to make a couple of quick comments, and and I feel that my role is just simply to make the information available to the committee, is in that regard, as far as the compliance and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure tonight that I made the committee aware. But one of the couple key things, to Kiernan's point, we do not have to have 100% compliance with our filtering. We have to have a good faith effort, which that will be determined in the court of law if we've made a good faith effort or not. So that's one point. And then a couple of times it's been mentioned about the IT staff monitoring what goes on and so forth. We do not have the time or the manpower to monitor all things that go through our content filter. That's a incredible job. It just, you would have to be there. I mean, you talk about the 500 videos coming up on YouTube per minute and so forth. You can imagine what we go through in a day as far as the traffic. Now, every once in a while, when we're looking at doing something else and we're working on the filter for whatever reason, do we see things, and does it flag us and go, whoa? It doesn't flag us per se. It just becomes more prevalent or aware to us if we see it. And at that point, my guys are really good. They know what a red flag is and so forth, and they will let me know if they found something that's inappropriate or that's dangerous for a student. And then from there, I contact the school administrator and they deal with it. But no, we do not have a constant monitoring of everything that goes through our content filter. We couldn't.
Any further discussion? Oh, Ms. Ray?
So just to clarify, this item is, you're not, Superintendent Langlis, you're not looking for a motion and a vote. Is the discussion enough for you to move forward? Because it sounds like, Ms. Litton from the LEA had some thoughts about moving forward. Chair Parks had that idea about the express consent versus implied. And have we given you enough direction, I suppose?
I feel like I didn't put this to vote because I just felt like it was maybe a good discussion that might generate more questions and things to follow up on. I don't think it's a bad idea to research things, but once we research things, I still want to run them through David to see what's feasible. There may be some things that other people say they're doing, whether they're doing them or not. Might just be a nice conversation. We need to know what's feasible. What I don't feel like I'm hearing, I don't feel like I'm hearing from a large enough group that we should stop pursuing this. I feel like this conversation says, let's pursue this, but we have to be very mindful of all the parameters. So I would be curious if there's any more feedback about, okay, maybe high school only with expressed written consent, because then you don't have to worry about 13 years old or under. And again, is that feasible? And David, you might already have your impression on that from a filtering perspective. So
we could turn it on for the high school and not for grades K through 8. That's the way it was actually before 3 years ago. So the answer is yes. Can we physically do that with the tools we have? Yes, we can do that.
Mr. Majerus-Collins.
Out of respect for members who don't share my opinion on this issue, I would just suggest to Superintendent Langlis that whenever the research is done, whenever the administration has a recommendation to bring forward, that this committee should take a vote on it. I don't want anybody on this committee to feel like they haven't had an opportunity to weigh in. Clearly, this issue generates passionate views, and I don't think that it should go forward without a school committee vote.
Any other thoughts on this? All right. The next agenda item is to receive and approve, number 9, to receive and approve formal school recognition of Eid as a holiday on the Lewiston Public Schools annual calendar.
Sorry, I was muted. I did share in the packet a short write-up, and I want to share it publicly. I don't have percentages in front of me, and I believe Mr. Chalet has joined us, and he can chime in as well as one of our liaisons here in our district. But over the last several years, I've been included in discussions where district leadership has weighed how we'll approach holidays that many of our students recognize. Eid is a Muslim festival, in particular Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha that many of our students and community members celebrate. For various reasons, we have not included Eid in our calendar. I believe it's time to shift in our thinking. We have the ability to communicate with our community the timeframes in which Eid could be recognized and then broadcast it out for a holiday school closure. This may create some complications, but we find ways to make it work for other holidays, and our students should no longer have to choose between missing school or practicing their faith. And I know, Siad, if you're still there, if you want to raise your hand, and Karen can allow you to chime in. But I've seen kids have to try to choose. Sometimes, and this is a holiday that moves, and it's based on lunar patterns, and so you don't always know when it's going to occur. You usually have a short window, but you don't know the specific day until it's announced by the lunar phase. Siad, if you want to chime in, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Sia Chalet. I live in Ward 1. I also work for the Lewiston Public Schools as a community relations coordinator. As Mr. Langles mentioned, I'm also a parent of one LPS student. Tonight, I'm speaking to you as a parent, and I want to tell you that I'm really excited about Eid becoming a public holiday in our district. So the benefit of recognizing Eid as a holiday will show that the Lewiston School District cares for all the students and will be seen as a welcoming environment. When we respect other beliefs, it shows, that you're showing respect towards others. It shows unity, and it shows that you're being considerate of other beliefs. If I give you some information about the two Eid that Muslim students celebrate, the first one comes right after the month of Ramadan. It's called Eid al-Fitr. So some of you might know that the month of Ramadan, it's a 1 month long fasting from dawn to sunset without food, water, etc. So Eid al-Fitr falls on the 10th month of the Islamic calendar. Muslim students, they commemorate the end of Ramadan. It's a month of, so the Muslim students, they come together, celebrate, families together, they celebrate, share meals, they participate in events, and also charitable givings. The second one is called Eid al-Adha. It's the second of the two major holidays, and it normally falls on the 12th month of the Islamic calendar. It normally coincides with this last day of Hajj pilgrimage. So as you all know that our community is diverse, and I believe that it's time to recognize other holidays, and I believe that we can make all families feel welcome and recognize their holidays. Please consider this, and I encourage our school board members to vote yes tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Some other just anecdotal pieces. I know that Eid recently fell on prom day, and because it wasn't on our calendar, we didn't even think of it, and that just felt wrong. We've had other times where it's fallen on days in which kids have tests and assessments and things of that nature, and they're forced to choose. It's not a small population of our community that recognize and celebrate this Muslim holiday. And so my proposal is to receive and approve that we would formally recognize Eid in our calendar, and that we would move forward from there.
We have more public hands raised. I would like to open it up for those people.
Allison?
Thank you. Again, Allison Litton. I do some things in the district. I would like to just commend Superintendent Langlis on bringing this to the board. This has been a long time coming. And, you know, as soon as the agenda came out, we had members that were just ecstatic to see this. The LEA is in full support of this move. And, you know, truly, again, just it's been a long time coming. I think, you know, as a first year teacher in Lewiston, I was pretty green as far as, you know, what this was all about. And I, you know, Eid came around and I had 3 students show up for class. That was kind of my first introduction to, wow, like this is serious. So, you know, it is something that absolutely needs acknowledgement, and our students shouldn't feel, you know, that they're missing out on anything on either end, either at home in their community or, you know, in their school community either. Just also wanted to discuss the impact that this would have on our staff that also celebrate. You know, it's been brought up that this is kind of a student issue, but it goes much further than that. We have staff members that have had to take a personal day or had to take a sick day if they didn't have a personal day prior to earned leave being something that that came in. With the ed techs that, you know, we had set holidays that were Thanksgiving and Christmas. In our last negotiations round, we were able to change those to kind of unnamed holidays that were compensated. But again, you know, this would just honor what should be honored. And I think just kind of make us a more cohesive community that that is respectful of all. So again, I appreciate it coming forward, and you have our full support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Hawa?
Hi again. My name is Hawa Abdil. I'm the ELL Intake and Assessment Coordinator for Lewiston Public Schools, and I live on Ward 1. When I saw this last night on the agenda, I was, as Allison was saying, I was happy, and I was like, yay, I feel like inclusive. I was like sensing the belonging, and I'm sure our students and our parents are also feeling the same way. And you know, I'm all about recognizing all holidays, and I'm all about celebrating everyone's holiday. You know, I sometimes, you know, I participate people in our office holidays. We have Christmas, we have Thanksgiving. So as you know, I was been thinking, and I know this was a long time coming. I remember asking this many times and having this discussions about like, okay, you know, like we need to have this on the table. So when I saw this on the last night on the agenda, I was more than happy to come in here and tonight and speak. You know, this is going to help a lot of parents that they don't have to feel like, you know, calling the school and saying, my child's going to be absent because of this reason. It will be excuse absence. You know, why do we, you know, we want them to put an excuse absent where we can recognize the holiday. And, you know, we have students who have perfect attendance, and, you know, that day they missed. And sometimes, again, as Mr. Langley was saying, they have to choose. And where sometimes it makes me disappointed when I see, you know, some of the students or A students, you know, going to school that day to take their test. You know, they could be celebrating with their family. You know, as most of you know, celebrate Christmas, which is, and Eid is similar to that. So I hope, you know, in the community tonight, just think about this, and, you know, how we can all making sure that our students feel like they're belonging and celebrate, you know, the religions around us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hawa.
I think we have 2 more hands raised.
Nez?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, awesome. I'm Nez Griffin. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Connors, and I also serve as LEA's Human and Civil Rights Chair. I would just like to weigh in that this recognition of Eid as a holiday is a positive step for our district to be more inclusive and supportive of our Muslim students who make up a significant percentage of our district's demographic. It also sends a message that we value our Muslim staff, students, and families. This is my 12th year of teaching in the district, and every year I have been fortunate enough to be able to take the day off to observe Eid, but this is not the case for our students who have to miss out on learning. So I certainly appreciate your kind consideration to accord our students the same right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nez. Aisha?
Hi again. Oh, and I'm speaking as the Equity Resource Coordinator of Lewiston Public Schools. And I just wanted to make sure I jumped in and put my 2 cents in, because this is something that has been in conversation since my short time here. But the one thing I want to make sure that I emphasize is that it's not about days off. It's about respecting the diversity that Lewiston Public Schools has openly celebrated and considers to be the foundation of who we are. Is like, we're diverse, we're Lewiston diverse, and yet we don't really honor what the diversity that's in our community. If we think about our calendar, it's a Christian calendar, it's all Christian. I am a Christian. However, I understand that when we think about as our demographic grows and as things change, we have to make sure that we're honoring the diversity that we say we're honoring with action. Another thing that keeps coming to mind as I'm working in our school district is the difference between inclusion and belonging. We're really into talking about, we want to be more inclusive. However, if you include me in things, but I don't make it there, or if you say, hey, that thing's on the internet, but I don't have access to it, I know that's a low-hanging fruit. But my point is, belonging to a community means you got my back and I got yours. And when there is something that I celebrate, or there's something that, whether it be, or something that I mourn, so on either end, being a part of that community means that we all celebrate that together. So having that little blurb on our district calendar about you can get an excused absence, it's a little embarrassing, only because I come from, and again, I'm new, I come from a place where this is not a conversation. This is something that just is, because our community is full of different religions that we all know that if we say we're a community, then we're celebrating as a community. So I can go on for days, but I'll just leave that there. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate this being a part of the conversation today.
Thank you, Aisha.
And we have one more hand.
Allison?
Hi, Allison Avery. I am a teacher at the middle school. I'm also the secretary for LEA. Just like so many before me have said, when I saw this on the agenda, my heart skipped a beat because it's about time. Just speaking from a middle school perspective, middle school is rough as it is, especially if your beliefs are different than other people's. And I think that there are a lot of our students who are very caught off guard when it comes to Eid, where they're torn between their home communities and their school communities, especially in the middle school level. I've had many conversations with students who feel embarrassed about their culture, embarrassed about their religion, and are torn at this point in their lives, and they're still trying to figure themselves out. So if we can take that one stress off of them by just including this in our school calendar, why can we not do that for them? This supports our students in their social emotional needs that we are so focused on teaching in the schools right now, that this is part of that. This is supporting them and supporting their families. And I just can't stress enough how important it is for our student population, and even the kids that don't celebrate Eid, to give them awareness of our community and to include them in the conversation surrounding that, and share what that holiday means to that part of our community, I think is huge. Because I think a lot of our community just doesn't understand, and so they judge without knowing. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we have one more hand again. Oh, you added Aisha instead of James. Nope.
The problem is they keep moving because, there we go. James?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm James Ford. I'm the Family Community Support Coordinator, and this is Family Support Bingo. This is it. This is an awesome recognition of who lives in Lewiston. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Physick.
I'll keep this short. A lot of the sentiments have already been echoed. I appreciate Superintendent Langlis bringing this up. I know we had conversations about doing things like this, and I appreciate you bringing us to light. Should have been done 10 years ago, and that's just probably a crime within itself. So with that said, I would encourage all members to vote for this. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I want to echo that. Thank you, Superintendent Langlis, for bringing this to us. It should have been done a long time ago. I do want to make the motion to approve the recognition of Eid as a holiday on the LPS calendar.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Beaublanc? Nope, you're muted.
I'll get it one of these days. Superintendent, would 2 days be added on to the end of the calendar?
Yeah, so this vote or approval of this would identify the 2 days as holidays, which would be non-school days, non-instructional days. And it would, depending on where they land, because the day of celebration doesn't always land within the calendar. But it could potentially be 2 days out of our year that we would then move to the end of the year.
Thank you.
Mr. Potvin?
Jake, for the benefit of the public, can you just review really quickly what other religious holidays we celebrate in the Lewiston school system?
We formally recognize Christian Catholic holidays. We have provisions for people to take the day and not be penalized for it in many respects, but we don't formally recognize other holidays in our calendar beyond Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, although that lands on a Sunday. So again, those holidays. Of course, we have federal holidays that we recognize beyond that, and those typically start our vacations.
So Good Friday is not recognized?
It is not. However, we have had staff request time on those days.
And any Jewish holidays on there?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah.
Ms. Hawkins?
So having been in the downtown years ago when the city first released spoke up against a very destructive conversation in the downtown, I really see this as the schools specifically taking another step to break some of the cycles that this town exists in. We are going to get pushback from people. Well, why do they deserve a special holiday? And that's where we have to remind them that sometimes change doesn't come to those who expect it immediately, but the change has to happen somewhere. I think this is a great step forward. And I know the students in my neighborhood and the families that I'm close with will very much appreciate this. I'm not going to call it an olive branch, but this definite head nod towards we're going to be what we're supposed to be.
Ms. Ray?
Thank you. I applaud this effort, but I did want to ask Superintendent Langlis if any other school districts in Maine have this policy.
I have not researched if other districts do this or not. I just knew it was a long conversation here, something I always supported in other conversations in years past, and thought this was a good opportunity to have a discussion.
Okay, I applaud it being brought forward, and as we talk about wanting to be a district that's has more diverse recruitment too. I mean, if this is something we're affording to the families and community members, then I think that this is a real stake in the ground, which is good.
Mr. Madras Collins.
This is a long overdue change. I am thrilled that it's been brought forward. I enthusiastically support it. Folks who live in my neighborhood, I know are really going to appreciate this, and really folks all over the city. It's long past time that Lewiston Public Schools recognize that there are people in this district other than Christians, and this is a crucial first step in making sure that our district is welcoming, is a place that people feel like they have ownership and belong and respect and dignity. So I can't support this any more enthusiastically.
Thank you. I see Aisha's hand is raised again. I'm not sure if that's still from before or if she was wanting to speak again. Oh, yep. Nope. I don't know.
Oh, thank you. So I ran in during bedtime and I heard the comments about the pushback. And I just wanted to add, as the Equity Resource Coordinator, yes, I have done some research, and some of the, I guess, practices, if there is more than 7.5% or more interest in this, to bring that religious holiday to that calendar, then it's acknowledged. I would assume that because we have such a big demographic or big population, and obviously it's not the first time this conversation has been had, I would expect you all to open that conversation up and say, yeah, sure, this has been a conversation about Eid for a very long time. If there is another conversation about, because I'm from New York, Jewish holidays are all over the school calendar. That just is what it is, as well as Eid is on the calendar. So having those conversations and listening to the community that you have is the answer. It's not, the pushback is what it is, but it's only pushback because obviously people aren't feeling heard. And so we should make the space to do that. But for right now, this conversation, according to what I've heard, has been a long time coming. And so there shouldn't be any pushback because this is a part of our community that is talking about not being seen, not being heard and acknowledged, and they want to belong to this community. So if anybody else feels that way, they should absolutely be acknowledged. That's all.
Thank you. Very well said. Thank you. Did somebody started speaking or was that like an echo? Okay, Mr. Damon.
Just a kind of a technical question for Jake. I know that you said that Eid moves around because the calendars don't line up. If we had a situation where this was a recognized school holiday and it was also the day that they took SATs, or that there's a day that's set out nationwide when the tests are done. If students chose not to take it that day because of that, would they be penalized?
So that actually happens now already. But as a testing site, we do have other mechanisms to provide students the chance to take that SAT. We would look to minimize anything for students that have that kind of interruption. But I do want to speak to your point about how this day it moves, and it can also be decided upon quite late. And we have contacts in our district like Howard and CAD who try to keep us informed when that date lands. It's a window, so we can put in our calendar that over this 2 or 3 day window we expect Eid to occur. As we get closer, we can message out to people that Eid, it will be one of these next few days. But I think one of the turning points for me, the logistical question always came up, and I think now that we've had to look COVID in the eyes and do things like cancel school at McMahon for teams of students at 6:30 in the morning the day of, then I think we can certainly pull this one off.
So you feel that it's something that can be managed, although it's not as simple as the Christian calendar, which sets the dates out years in advance. So this is very much more of a fluid date.
It's fluid to an extent, but if you Googled it right now, it'd give you a 2 or 3 day window. It might even give you the date, but sometimes it shifts by a day. It's about when the moon can be seen in its phase in certain parts of the world, and that's why it can flex a little bit. So it would leave room for some flexibility. But I think for things like SATs or when I mentioned the prom earlier, if this was on our calendar, we'd pick a different day because we know that that could be Eid. And I think right now that's one of the things we're failing to do. We're booking major significant things. I mean, we've had hundreds of kids not attend the prom because it's a day of family and religious celebration. And that's a really tough thing to put kids through. But if it was on our calendar, I think they'd pick, a week later or a week before, things of that nature. And I would include the SATs in that. We have had some complications in and around athletics. Some of that's beyond our control with MPA scheduling. But I think putting this on our calendar might give Jason at least more muscle to say to those who are planning and scheduling things that, hey, look, if that's going to land on a holiday, it's going to have an impact on our schools. And I think the kids may still go play, but again, it's that wherewithal that we currently don't put in our calendar that I think is really necessary.
And I'll end it with just, putting on my negotiations committee hat. This becomes potentially additional days later in the year. Is that something that we would have to take back to negotiations to get that, agreed to by the LEA? I realize Allison said that they were in support of it, but that doesn't always seem to cut it when it comes down to the final analysis.
Yeah, so I would liken it to almost to how we've done snow days in the past, where those days are built in. We could actually build in a finite day because we can look at the calendar, and if we know Eid is going to be hypothetically mid-May, we know that. We may not know which day. Let's say it lands on a Saturday, hypothetically. We can actually take that day back out. But we can build those 2 days in our calendar. So they'll be roughly when they will be. We'd have some kind of marking on it. And then at the end of the year, we would put those 2 days in if we know there's going to be 2 days during the school year. The one that often happens in the spring, it can be mixed as to when it happens. It doesn't always happen in May. Sometimes it is actually when school's out. But we've had that conversation about summer school. So if Eid lands on July, whatever, will we have school that day? And we have never said no because we didn't plan that way. We didn't think of it that way. So this would be that recognition. So it won't always be 2 days. But I think we build them right in.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion or are we ready to vote? All right, Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
3.
Yes.
4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
6.
I'm going to yield to the First Amendment and vote no.
7.
Yes.
Miss Ray.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
Thank you.
Madam
Agenda
Chair,
item.
could we take a 2-minute break?
Is anyone opposed to that? All right, we will take
Thank you so much.
Thank you. As soon as Kieran returns, we can start back up. I don't know if you're on, Dave.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
You are still live. I didn't shut it down, so I just made sure everybody was muted.
Okay. I see that Jamie Watson has her hand raised, and I don't know if that was for the last discussion and we missed it, or if it's an accident, or, well, now it looks like her hand is raised twice, which is strange.
Oh, hi Megan, can you hear me?
Yes, but it's a really bad echo.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hate Zoom.
It says that you're connected twice. I don't know if you're on multiple devices.
No. Let me just X out a couple of things, maybe. I mean, I don't have to speak. I know you guys are on break now. I just wanted to make a point, and you guys can talk about this or think about it, but I'm really concerned that teachers have to use a personal day for a religious holiday. I'm not sure.
Hang on just one second. Are we back live, Dave? I mean, we're still live.
Yes, you
So
are.
we can, I guess this is a continuation from the last discussion.
Is there still a bad echo?
Yes, there is a bad echo, yes.
There's two sessions may be open, two tabs may be open in your browser.
No, I only have one.
I'm removing one of you, Jamie. Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now there's only one of you, so maybe that will help.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm not sure. I don't even see another tab. I only have two open. I mean, I can wait. Am I still here?
Yep, you are. You can go ahead.
Okay.
It's fine.
Now I can. That's fine. I just wanted to touch base. I'm concerned that teachers have to use a personal day for a religious holiday when people who celebrate Christmas do not have to use a personal day for that. I was a little thrown off when the LEA person said that teachers have had to use a personal day for Eid. I'm just wondering what our Jewish teachers do when they celebrate. Do they really have to use a personal day?
I don't know the answer to that. Jake, would you like to comment on that?
I mean, I would defer that to Bobby. I know that people take those days and recognize holidays are not a problem. I don't know how their time is compensated.
Yeah, I would be interested to know that, because if we as teachers are given Christmas off as a religious holiday, that opportunity should be also afforded to people who celebrate the Jewish holidays and who also celebrate Eid. And I'm really glad we're having the Eid conversation, but we also have to remember that we also have Jewish faculty in our system as well. And there may be other holidays and other religions that we're not speaking of at this time. And to make a teacher use a personal day for a religious holiday when Christians do not have to take one for Christmas doesn't seem right, or doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, Bobby, do you know that answer by chance?
I do not know that answer. No, it's interesting.
Yeah, because at my school district, we're not docked for personal days for celebrating religious holidays. We have several Jewish faculty in my building, so that just does not sit well with me. And with this being public and recorded and going to be on YouTube, I hope that that's something that's going to be looked at, because that seems really unfair. That's it. Thank you.
So we have another hand raised. I feel like we're going out of order, but I also don't want to ignore the public that are attempting to speak. So we'll allow one more person with their hand raised for now, and then we'll continue on with the next agenda item. Eric San.
Hi.
You can go
So
ahead and speak, please.
I just heard the conversation that the teacher was talking about. And as a Muslim and Lewiston public worker, for me, when I'm taking Eid, I usually just put it a personal day because there is nothing else I can do. So we will love to hear that's also open conversation about Eid and other religions, and to just respect each other as staff. And we can also practice our religion part. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like we may need to have some further discussion about this in the future. I just closed out my agenda. Hang on one second, please. I think the next agenda item is to receive a report from one of the subcommittees. If you have the agenda in front of you and you know which subcommittee is next, please go ahead while I try to open mine back up.
It is the Finance Committee, represented by Chair Mr. Botton.
Thank you.
Okay, really quickly, we met before the holidays and we took up the CIP presentation and budget, which isn't finalized yet, but we reviewed recommendations from administration and we kind of adopted an aggressive, a somewhat cautious aggressive view on how we're going to address CIP this year. A lot of comments about, kind of separating in three ways. One, what we need right now, what we need maybe in the future, and what we want. And I think a lot was emphasized on the what we need right now and to justify those needs, because pretty much 90% of what we looked at, we can literally make the argument very easily to the public, to the council, et cetera, for where this district needs to be. And taking into account that there's been I don't want to say neglect because it's a different word, but rather not emphasizing the importance or a timetable. So I think that we're trying to be a little more aggressive with it this year, and to present a really robust group of recommendations for you all to take a look at. And I think I don't remember the date, Bobby, what date that's going to be presented, or what you need to do, or what you have left to do before you present it.
We don't have a date yet scheduled for that, Ron. We have to work on that. We have to get that done.
One thing that would be interesting and helpful is when this weekend, when we have our retreat, I think we've mentioned we wanted to hear budget requests or where we should put our priorities. I think it would be helpful to also throw in where you all stand on CIP and how much of a priority to put on that in various items. So that pretty much took the whole meeting. We're meeting tomorrow. By the way, the members who are here, we're going to meet at Dingley at 3:00. And those of you who wish to, however you guys arrange it for the Zoom, you can do that too. Those are not comfortable coming in. Tomorrow we're taking up expenditures, and our goal is to take a look at expenditures and identify what areas require the long-range planning, so that we can come up with an effective plan to each year address getting the school department to a certain point in virtually all of the areas that we've talked about over the year. I think we're all pretty much aware of where we need to focus. And I think as we take a look at what the expenditures, I'm kind of curious on, ultimately, if we want to get to where we want to be, how much is that going to be, and how long will it take to get there? So I guess we're going to mash that around a little bit tomorrow. So, and then we have the audit. We're going to be reviewing the audit on the 22nd of January, Jay? 25th? Okay, 25th. And then it'll be presented to you guys, and hopefully we have a positive review there. And I just want to throw out the homeless committee, which is also meeting. I haven't had a chance to catch up with Linnea. Just that we're meeting on Wednesday, if you want to speak to it, from 4 to, be honest with you, I don't look at the times, so maybe you have them there. So, and whether you're going to be remote or meet at the Dingley building.
Ron, can I just add to your question around when it's presented? I do want the committee to know that the LCIP is being presented to the City Council on January 12th. They're holding a workshop at 6 p.m. on that day.
Okay.
And the homeless committee is 4 to 5, and we are going to meet at Longley. And those who need to be remote, we can accommodate that. Just let us know.
Next would be the Facilities Committee, Mr. Damon.
I really don't have anything to report.
Okay. Curriculum is up next.
So we haven't had a meeting since my last report. I'll keep it brief. Our next meeting is on Wednesday. It's from 5 to 6. Superintendent Langlis, I don't know if there's a way that potentially the two of us could just swing that from Dingley. But that'll be our next meeting, where we'll be doing sort of a deep dive into the, I'm sorry, Longley is what I meant. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the elementary school curriculum. And so obviously I'll have more to report on that after we do it.
Great.
I could meet at Longley if we do some Zoom components, because that's where I'll be just prior to. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, same. Because I mean, I'm gonna be there for homeless, and it was occurring to me that trying to get back for a meeting that starts at 5 from a meeting that ends at 5 is not going to work.
Okay, Ms. Ray, Policy Committee.
Yep, so again, you saw the fruits of our labor tonight in the second reading. We're going to continue our march forward with Section A of the policy review during our January meeting, which has not yet been set, the time or date or time. However, we are taking a brief detour to bring ourselves into compliance with Maine state law, and we'll be taking a look at our truancy policy, which is policy JHB. I'm also going to just do another quick check and make sure our other policies are in line with some state laws that came into effect since we last met. So maybe take a detour to all of those and make sure we're where we need to be.
Great, thank you. And negotiations.
Yeah, we reached out to the MEA representative on November 19th, waiting to hear back after they speak with LEA representatives to figure out when we will start the certified professionals or teachers contract and the technology contract. So I expect to hear soon when we'll start those.
Thank you. And we will go back to Ms. Ray for agenda item number 11, the report from the City Council representative.
So we have a meeting tomorrow night with quite a lot on the agenda. Kind of most pertinent polls from that. We have a workshop on the Lewiston Police Department's building assessment, and then another on some public art. I know that we have some great murals at the high school. We're hoping to determine a site for a mural on the suffrage movement. In terms of agenda items, again, the most pertinent would be probably the police department is presenting their public safety plan for approval with 3 components of expanding mental health support partnerships, increasing foot patrols and crime suppression patrols, expanding their selective enforcement team, which works on crimes that are violent and involve drugs. And then the other thing, there are a number of annual appointments to boards and committees that are happening tomorrow. Ms. Avery stole my thunder a little bit on the LCIP being presented on January 12th. No worries. Good to have that reinforcement. So that might be something folks want to tune into. And then also, rumor is there will be a workshop on the Charter and Charter Commission for the city of Lewiston coming up. I do not have a date for that yet. I think it's closer to the end of the month, but just in case we don't see each other before then, wanted to put it on folks' radar.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus-Collins, did you want to comment on Ms. Ray's report?
No, if anyone has a comment on her report, they should go ahead.
Okay. Your hand is still raised.
Yep. Okay. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules. And
Madam Chair, I'd like to call for orders of the day.
Thank you. All right.
And hold the election as required by charter for school committee chair.
So the call for the order of the day is, it takes precedent over all motions. And so we will continue with agenda item number 12, which is a report from the school committee chair. The only thing I have to report out on today is that
I have a point of order. I'd like to refer that question to the parliamentarian.
So number 5 of the call for the orders of the day states that it is not a debatable. It takes precedent and it's not debatable. So there'll be no debate on this.
I understand that, but this is a point of order. I'm challenging the chair's ruling and would like to refer it to the parliamentarian.
As a privileged order, as a privileged motion, that supersedes everything else. So the update that I would like to provide
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying, Chair Parks. As a committee member, I have a right to challenge the ruling of the chair to the parliamentarian and then subsequently to the entire school committee. So I'd like to go ahead and do that.
Can you give me 1 second so I can grab my book? I have to step off camera.
Sure, or I can read it from the book right now.
Mr. Majerus-Collins, you are challenging the chair on
her ruling that the motion to suspend the rules cannot be considered.
Okay, and the chair is saying that calling for the orders of the day, so that's what you'd like me to refer to? 1 moment, please.
It's on page 220 of the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order. And it takes precedence over all other motions, except for a motion to suppress the rules that relates to priority of business. And Mr. Majerus-Collins's motion to suspend the rules does not relate to the priority of business. It relates to a separate subject matter.
And I'm challenging the ruling of the chair to the parliamentarian and subsequently to a vote of the school committee.
I gotta catch up for 1 second, so just give me a minute here. This is not a usual motion that is made, so I apologize that I'm consuming at the moment, but just want to make sure.
It also states that no subsidiary motion can be applied to this call. It does not require a second. It is not debatable.
Yeah, and it can be challenged and can be overturned with 2/3 vote.
No, cannot be reconsidered upon a call by a single member of the orders of the day must be enforced.
Except that a 2/3 vote can set them aside.
And that is that the orders of the day can be set aside either by a vote of 2/3 in the negative on a question put by the chair as to the assembly's desire to proceed to the orders of the day.
Okay, so I'm calling for a vote on the chair's ruling.
I am not going to agree with Mr. Majerus-Collins, and so it would proceed to the vote of the board.
So the board will be voting now if we would like to continue with the agenda as written, or if we would like to proceed and hear Mr. Majerus Collins's motion to suspend the rules. Ward 1.
Point of order. That was an or vote. So yeah, voting yes means what and voting no means what?
The 2/3 vote must be in the negative on a question put by the chair. So the question put by the chair is, would we?
The question put by the chair is, shall we adhere to the orders of the day, right?
Shall we adhere to the orders of the day?
And a vote in the affirmative would mean that we would move on to whatever item was next before this started. And a no vote would allow Mr. Majerus Collins to put something on the table. Is that
correct?
Okay, thank you.
Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
No.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5. Ward 5.
No.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
No.
Ms. Ray.
No.
And I vote yes.
All right.
Jake, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Vote is 5 yes, 4 no, which means that we would carry the business of the day.
Thank you. So agenda item number 12 is the report from the school committee chair. The brief update that I have to provide is that the City Spirit Committee, which is a compilation of school representatives, city representatives, and representatives from Auburn schools and Auburn City, are nearing the end of our work on creating a statement of equity that will be utilized district-wide, citywide, and through Lewiston and Auburn to work towards gaining some equity and respecting the diversity in our community. And that work should be completed relatively soon. It was delayed a little bit by some sickness on the committee, but we're back to work and things should be moving along soon. Agenda item number 14 is school committee community announcements.
Chair Parks, are you taking questions on your report?
Oh, are there questions on my report? Yes, Mr. Majerus Collins.
Thank you. Chair Parks, I want to commend you for your many years of work, towards this equity statement. I think that many folks in the committee would endorse that sentiment. You've clearly worked very hard on this, and we're all looking forward to seeing it. I was wondering if you had any better sense of exactly when we'll be able to take that in and consider it for adoption in Lewiston. I know that obviously it's been coming for some time.
It has, yeah, the work has been going on very rapidly recently. Like I said, it was delayed a little bit by some sickness and that delayed some meetings. And then there was a change in direction with some of the consultants that were working on the project, but it is moving forward and I estimate it'll be within the next couple of weeks. I don't know if Bobby has any input because she participates in that as well. Do you have foresee a time frame?
We have not decided on a time frame. There isn't one set yet, but it's, Megan, everything you just said is spot on.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Look forward to it.
Mr. Potman?
Just for the benefit of the public, can you just go over the timeline of when we will be taking up the chair's position? I believe something about this weekend. So just so that they know for clairvoyancy when we're taking it up and then when it's going to come to a public vote at a committee.
Yes, I believe all members of the committee are already aware that that is on the agenda for the retreat next weekend, and it will come to a public vote at the next scheduled regular business meeting.
Thank you.
I have
You're
a
welcome.
question.
Yes.
The retreat on Saturday, as everyone knows, is a public meeting. So can we count on that being streamed live on YouTube?
That I don't know. That would be a conversation to have with IT. We don't generally stream retreats, but I'm sure that's something that we can have a conversation about in light of the change in our COVID in our community. Moving on to, Ms. Ray.
Sorry, it's hard with the background again. Is there already an agenda? I haven't seen one yet, but maybe I've missed it.
I don't think it's been sent out yet, no.
It'll be
you.
out tomorrow. We just shared in an email that item, but I did want to check with the group to see if we are meeting. We had originally intended to meet at the Green Ladle. We can still do that. I confirmed with the Green Ladle today that they can follow all safety precautions if that is what we wish to do, and we can remote in for those who don't wish to, or we can do it remotely.
Does anyone have any input on that? Miss Ray, Miss Whitlow. Sorry, Miss Ray, and then Miss Whitlow.
So meeting at the Green Ladle seems fine. I don't know if the question is if there will be food there. I think, I'd happily go to a meeting. I'm not going to a restaurant indoors though. So if we could keep it so that folks could go outside to have snacks or have lunch, whatever they need to do, that'd be great. But happy to participate in person as long as there's an agreed upon, not really going to dine in.
So the Green Ladle can provide food for us, and they know all the procedures to follow. Not trying to compel anyone to eat. We could also, if there's a decision to not eat on site, I can try to build in maybe a break for lunch so people can do what they wish. I do need to let them know by Wednesday for ordering and whatnot. And I would also say if we're not going to partake in food on site, that we just use Connors.
Can I just follow up with what my intent was with my, thank you. So I do whatever you all need to, but if we could not have a working lunch, because I will depart during that period of time personally.
Miss Whitlow.
If I may, I'm thinking that there's a possibility that I would be full remote for that meeting. I've tested negative, but I have been hit from several directions as exposure. So I think I'm going to be playing it safe and stay at home. So I will probably be taking more tests this week just to confirm, but I think from the safe side, I will probably do this remote.
Anybody else want to comment on this? Mr. Damon?
Well, I realize it's been scheduled. All things considered, would it make a difference if we postponed it a week or two, just till we see where all of this is going to shake out as far as the holiday testing for the COVID?
Mr. Majerus-Collins?
I'll be in attendance if it occurs in person, but given Member Whitlow's concerns and given that the committee, made a change tonight, and a change that I think is the right one, I would encourage us to have Saturday's meeting remote, unless everyone is comfortable and feeling their best selves, just because we really can't be too careful.
Mr. Potvin?
Just my thoughts is that, the Green Ladle, one way or the other, if we have food there, great. If we don't, just to have time to be able to go grab a sandwich down the street. And if we're not at the Green Ladle or at Connors, either one, we can put 20-foot distance between us over there. I don't think there's I'm not concerned about the distancing part. I think it's both facilities are great for us to take this up. I think it's pertinent that we do take this up. I'm not a big fan of letting things percolate. And I think there's things that we have to address. And, we've already mentioned what we're planning on doing, so that should move forward. And whether there's food or not, I'm either way on it. So, I mean, I like the green ladle food, don't get me wrong, but if we don't have it, I'm all set with going to grab a sandwich and being at Connors.
Thank you. Mr. Beauplan.
I'm not in favor of postponing it. I'll go wherever the group wants to go. That's fine with me.
Okay. Mr. Majerus Collins.
I just want to say that in addition to thinking that we ought to be remote, I agree with Member Beauplan that we should not postpone.
Do we want to follow up with an email, Jake, on what the plan is?
Yeah, if anybody has any last bits of information, I'll give it some thought and make sure that I share it out by tomorrow.
Is Dave able to do it so that there's a remote aspect to it on a Saturday?
Dave, I'd also be curious, because of the nature of the retreat, it would just be on or off. If you could show me the ropes, I'd be able to do it so that you can not have to work on Saturday.
Yeah, there's some aspects to it. The equipment we set up at Connors, there's quite a bit of equipment that we set up at Connors to make that all work. We would have to do probably, which is the difficulty, because if you try to do a stripped down version of that, the concern will be the audio aspects of it, for sure. So yeah, it just involves a good deal of moving equipment from Connors over to the Green Ladle and trying to set it all up and, making sure everything works the way it should. So not that it can't be done. It's, so, and the answer is yes, I'm sure if I moved stuff over and showed you, I'm sure that, you give it a go. So.
I mean, from that perspective, Dave, would it be easier for one of us to facilitate and that you have the day off if we did it via Zoom?
I can definitely help you set up a Zoom if you want to do full remote and go with a Zoom. I can certainly set that up, and and then as soon as it gets started, then I'm out, and you guys go from there. And as long as I've made you and Karen and Megan co-hosts, it's just a regular Zoom session like we're doing now, except it's a private one. Unless you guys want it Zoom to YouTube, and I certainly can start that out for you and then back away from it. So that I can do. Yep.
Well, I think if we go remote, it would be public.
Yeah, so you can go remote and we can make it public and put it on YouTube just like we're doing now. And then just after you guys get started, I'll drop off, and given anything strange, you should be fine. The only thing I want to check with my guys is to make sure that the internet over at the Green Ladle is up and running the way it should, which I believe it is.
It sounds like if we're not going to be eating, and if all the equipment is already at Connors, that maybe we're doing it fully remote, that we don't need to move it to Green Ladle.
Yeah, but I'm also feeling that there's enough sense for the group to do it remote, and then people can do it from the comfort of their own space. We would still build a break for lunch. I always prefer in person, but I also understand where we're at.
Ms. Ray?
Thank you. I'm on board with all of this so far. And I think just the one other thing that's kind of flagging in my mind is, yes, it is a public meeting, but so our agendas normally have how the public can participate as part of it, the 3 minutes and raising the hands, things like that. Are we allowing public participation, or is it just broadcasting the considerations?
So past practice is that it's available to the public, but there hasn't been public input as part of the retreat.
Okay. Mr. Majerus Collins.
I mean, I was going to say that either way is fine with me, but I don't see the same need to provide the public participation as I do to be able to provide the public transparency. If members of the public can see our retreat, then they can voice their opinions about it at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's been past practice. It's not usually attended. It is open to the public, but not usually attended. So I think with that information, I would lead right now with we would use this format, and I'll get the details out to you as well as I can tomorrow.
Perfect.
I'll happily set it up for you, Jake. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Agenda item number 13, report from the superintendent.
So I shared a number of things earlier. Some other items just be mindful of in the relief package that was passed recently. It does appear that there will be funds coming our way. The nature of those funds, we don't know. How much, we don't know. Our timeline on those, we think will be increased, but we're not certain. So once we know the limitations of those, we'll make sure that we're sharing information with you. Long story short is we believe we're going to receive funds as part of that bill. We don't know how much, we don't know when, we don't know how long we'll have to submit it or spend it, or any other detail necessary to really have further conversation about it. But we do anticipate that coming our way. That's it for me right now.
All right, agenda item number 14, school committee community announcements. Does anybody have any community announcements to make? Ms. Ray.
Thank you. So the first one, very simple. I attended Miss Rich's ELL kindergarten class before the break that she had invited us to, and it was just such a joy to see the smiling faces and a little peek into the chaos, but she managed it so well. So I would encourage other folks to do that. And then the second thing is, so I serve on the Legislative Policy Committee for the Maine Municipal Association. And if there are any education bills coming up through the state legislature, we have our first meeting, I believe on, now I don't know what the date is because I closed my calendar. It's coming up in 2 weeks on a Thursday. And so if we as a committee want to express any sentiments on education bills, I'm not sure which ones are out there since closure, but want to make sure that everyone's kind of looped in on that. And if we do want to weigh in on things going on at the legislature, that there's an opportunity to do so there in addition to personal testimony.
Thank you. Any other community announcements? Agenda item number 15, future agenda items. Mr. Physick.
Can we get our retention on, and can it be sooner than later as we're entering the budget cycle? So we might want to address that sooner than later.
You mean like staff retention?
Yes.
Mr. Majoris Collins.
Given the conversation today and the progress we made on making Eid a holiday, I think that we should have a future agenda item on other religious holidays. The most obvious of those to my mind being the possibility of recognizing Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then potentially Good Friday as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, agenda item number 16 is to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
No.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
Ms. Ray.
Yes.